Chapter 522. The fact that the stone general Han Baxin had accepted Nie Donglu as a disciple had once surprised all the warriors in the northern Yan region. That was because Han Baxin and Nie Donglu were obviously two different people. How could such people become master and disciple? In fact, Han Baxin did not have such complicated reasons for accepting Nie Donglu as a disciple. Han Baxin had entered the imperial court before venturing out into the world. He was simple and direct, but he had also been tricked countless times. That was why he was looking for a successor this time. He wanted someone with a more flexible mind, someone who would not be easily tricked by others. Nie Donglu was talented and smart, which suited Han Baxin's requirements very well. Of course, there were countless people in the world who met these two requirements. Nie Donglu was chosen by Han Baxin as a disciple because of another special characteristic of him, which was his refusal to admit defeat. In the eyes of Nie Donglu's enemies like Chu Xiu, Nie Donglu was too calculative and somewhat disgusting. He did not even have much of a warrior spirit. However, it was undeniable that Nie Donglu's will was extremely tough. He had been defeated countless times in his life, and he had suffered a few losses at the hands of Chu Xiu. In the end, Nie Donglu did not feel the slightest bit discouraged and was able to stand up again. He was not like Lin Kaiyun of Sword King City, who had been completely crippled after being defeated once. Nie Donglu's characteristics were very similar to Han Baxin's. In his early years, Han Baxin did not rely on his talent to conquer the world. He had also suffered defeat after defeat to achieve his current status. Nie Donglu was able to become Han Baxin's disciple mainly because of this. At that moment, Han Baxin rubbed his fist and said, "What are you waiting for? Let's just directly make a move. I actually want to exchange blows with that Pang Hu again. I was still in the Northern Yan army when we were annihilating the 36 northern bandits. However, I didn't have the chance to take action at that time. I didn't expect that Pang Hu, who wasn't that famous among the 36 northern bandits, would actually be so powerful. He escaped last time when I was caught off guard. This time, he won't be able to slip away so easily." The last time Han Baxin fought Pang Hu, it could be said that both of them were caught off guard. Pang Hu did not expect Han Baxin to make a move, nor did Han Baxin expect Pang Hu to be so strong. However, Pang Hu had stirred up Han Baxin's fighting spirit. He couldn't wait to strike again. Nie Donglu frowned but did not notice anything amiss. He looked at Nie Rinlong and waited for Nie Rinlong to nod. Nie Donglu then said in a deep voice, "Let's do it. Hide your breath and don't let the people from Qilian village discover us. This time, we will not let a single person from Qilian village go." Everyone present nodded and stealthily headed in the direction Miao Chunmao pointed. The place that Miao Chunmao was pointing at was a huge mansion in Shuilian City. It was big enough to accommodate hundreds of people. The elites of Qilian Stockade Village were lying in ambush here, keeping a low profile and recuperating. However, when everyone was about to hide in front of the mansion, Nie Rinlong stopped in his tracks, and his expression suddenly became extremely ugly. Nie Donglu was stunned at first, but then his expression changed as well. He also felt that something was amiss. The long street around the mansion was very quiet, extremely quiet. The surroundings were empty, and there was not even a single pedestrian. It was very strange. Of course, this could also be understood as Qilian village buying the entire street to ensure their concealment, to prevent outsiders from recognizing them. However, in reality, this behavior was even more deceptive. Buying an entire street to hide because they had nothing better to do. Was there anything more obvious and idiotic than this? The people from Qilian village were not idiots. They would not do such an idiotic thing. Hence, the only explanation was that there was something wrong. Whether it was Nie Rinlong or Nie Donglu, they all subconsciously looked at Miao Chunmao because he was the first to discover this place. However, at this moment, they realized that Miao Chunmao, who had always been very active, was now very low-key. He was actually walking at the back of the group. Nie Rinlong and Nie Donglu's expressions darkened. Both of them were about to order everyone to retreat, but at this moment, the long street shone with the light of an icy blue formation. Countless chi of heaven and earth condensed, turning into spear-like icicles that pierced towards the people from the Morgue Village Alliance. Ambush! Be careful! Nye Rinlong roared, but it was already too late. The icicles were like spears, piercing through almost 30% of the warriors present in an instant. Under the blessing of the formation, the inside of the icicles not only became extremely sharp, but also had the effect of tearing vital energy apart. A moment of carelessness and being killed was a very common thing. The moment the formation was activated, a dense crowd of warriors emerged from the surroundings of the long street and attacked the people from the Morgue Village. Pang, who held a huge scarlet spear in his hand and brought it down on Han Baxin's head. Its power was like a mountain shattering. The Scarlet Red Gang energy brought with it a scorching aura. When the spear fell, it actually had a bit of the charm of a falling meteorite. Golden Gang energy condensed around Han Baxin. As he put his palms together to form a seal, it was like a giant hammer that smashed down, causing the chi of heaven and earth to explode. Both sides attacked with all their might. The gang energy dissipated and they were evenly matched. The moment Pang who made his move, Bai Han Tian also made his move. Bai Han Tian did not use any weapons, but as his palms fell one after another, snowflakes fell from the sky. The dense snowflakes were like the edge of a sword, tearing apart one's gang energy and weakening one's chi and blood. It was very mystical. Heaven and earth revolved in Nye Rinlong's hands. Under his control, the power of heaven and earth blocked the snowflakes. Looking at Bai Han Tian, Nye Rinlong bellowed, "Bai Han Tian, are you crazy? How dare you join forces with the Chilean bandits to attack my morgue?" In fact, the moment the formation appeared, Nye Rinlong had already suspected that it was the drifting snow city of the far north. This was because the formation was the signature formation of the drifting snow city of the far north, the ice-killing formation. However, Nye Rinlong still could not understand. If it was because of what happened before, the drifting snow city of the far north should have no reason to attack his morgue. It was because it was not worth it. In the end, Nye Rinlong had guessed wrong. Not only did the drifting snow city of the far north make their move, but they also made their move to take his life. Bai Han Tian said expressionlessly, "It's because I'm not crazy that I made my move. Nye Rinlong, if you had stayed in your east of Yen province and developed your morgue, I wouldn't have bothered to go against you. But this time, you invaded my north. For this matter, I have to give an explanation to those sects in the north." Although the drifting snow city of the far north made their move because they were afraid of the expansion of the morgue, they could not say so on the surface. Secretly, the drifting snow city of the far north was for their own benefit. But on the surface, the drifting snow city of the far north was seeking justice for the forces under them. For something like building a reputation, it wasn't just limited to the morgue, the drifting snow city of the far north also knew how to do it. Nye Rinlong frowned as he blocked the attack. He did not believe Bai Han Tian's nonsense. The drifting snow city of the far north was not so magnanimous that they would go against the morgue for the sake of the martial arts forces in their territory. Most importantly, Nye Rinlong could not understand how the drifting snow city of the far north had colluded with Pang Hu. One must know that there was no connection between the two and they even had enmity before. Nye Rinlong's heaven and earth cloud hand was unleashed to the extreme. It was not that he was no match for Bai Han Tian, but Nye Rinlong's mental strength was focused on other parts of the battlefield. The drifting snow city of the far north and the Chilean stockade strength, the Morgue Alliance was already at a disadvantage. Not to mention that they had been ambushed by the formation and lost a large number of their men. Now, Nye Rinlong no longer had to think about killing the Chilean stockade. He should be thinking about how to escape. Bai Han Tian, is the drifting snow city of the far north really going to fight to the death with my morgue? Nye Rinlong shouted angrily in a low voice. Bai Han Tian shook his head indifferently and said, "Of course not. Even if I did, I wouldn't be able to kill you, and I wouldn't be able to destroy your loyalty manor. However, it won't be that easy for you to leave. If Bai Han Tian could destroy the morgue, he wouldn't mind being ruthless. However, if he really wanted to fight to the death with Nye Rinlong now, it was still unknown if he could do it. The drifting snow city of the far north would also suffer some losses. Therefore, the safest thing now was to inflict heavy damage to the morgue, so that within a decade or even a few decades, the morgue would not dare to have any thoughts of invading the north. Nianlong let out a long sigh and said in a low voice, "By Hannan, I admit defeat this time. However, I want to know, who was the one who defeated me this time?" Ever since the Qilian stockade suddenly retreated, something was not right. There was definitely someone secretly plotting this. Who was it? This kind of plotting in the dark is not your style. Pang Hu is a boorish man, he doesn't have the brains to do this. Who was it that schemed against my morgue? The person who schemed against the morgue's people had a simple method, but they had exploited the biggest loophole of the morgue, which was the fragility of the alliance. The drifting snow city of the far north was obviously roped in by someone. However, there was no such person in the Qilian stockade previously. Otherwise, the Qilian stockade would not have sat back and watched as the morgue's alliance killed several of their stockades. A strange look flashed in Bai Hantian's eyes. Although he was now working together with the Qilian stockade, he did not have a good impression of Pang Hu. Therefore, when Nianlong asked, Bai Hantian shifted his gaze to the other side and chuckled. "It's that person, the Yinma clan's Devil Path's outstanding talent, Lin Yi. You should have heard of his name." This time, Pang Hu had asked the Yinma clan for help, and the Yinma clan had sent this person. The person who has been fighting with your morgue has not been the Qilian stockade, but this person. Bai Hantian only planned to inflict heavy damage on the morgue's morgue and kill their ambition. As for the rest, he did not care. On the contrary, Bai Hantian was happy to see the morgue's alliance and the Qilian stockade both suffer. Chapter 523. These damned devil cultivators. Nianlong looked at Chu Xiu, who was dressed in black and wearing a mask. If Bai Hantian had not stopped him, he would have torn Chu Xiu apart. Only God knew how Pang Hu had colluded with these devil cultivators. If he had known earlier that there was someone else involved, Nianlong would have been 100 times more careful. It was because the enemy was in the dark while they were in the light that they had been tricked so badly. At this time, Chu Xiu didn't care about Nianlong's gaze. He was staring at Nie Donglu. In fact, Chu Xiu had wanted to attack Nie Donglu from the beginning. But someone else had beaten him to it. That person was Bai Wuji. Previously, when Bai Wuji and Nie Donglu were both in the innate realm, they had fought a few times. But Bai Wuji didn't have the upper hand. This time, Bai Wuji had been silent for a long time. He didn't think he was any weaker than Nie Donglu. Seeing Bai Wuji rushing towards him with his spear, Nie Donglu said coldly, "Your northern floating snow city played a good trick. You actually joined forces with the Qilian village bandits to attack my memorial village. This time, my memorial village suffered a loss because of a moment of carelessness. We will settle this score in the future." Bai Wuji sneered, "Nie Dong, why are you talking so much nonsense? Do you still think there will be a future? It's still unknown whether you can leave here alive today." As his voice fell, the spear in Bai Wuji's hand smashed down with a piercing cold wind. The icy chi was bone-chilling, but it was majestic. Nie Donglio's heaven and earth cloud hand was unleashed. With the heaven and earth in his hand, countless strands of astral energy spiraled down like silk threads. Bai Wuji's powerful spear strike was frozen in the air, unable to move even an inch. Bai Wuji's expression changed. How could Nie Donglio's strength be so great? But before Bai Wuji could recover from his shock, Nie Donglio's hands bloomed with dazzling golden chi. He grabbed Bai Wuji's spear with both hands, and a burst of golden astral energy burst out. He swung the spear and sent Bai Wuji flying. Furthermore, Nie Donglu did not stop at all. His fist landed like a blazing sun, ferocious and domineering. This wasn't a technique from the morgue, but Han Baxian's vast Yang 9 Extreme's mysterious art. Bai Wuji's eyes shone with a frosty light. He used the Frost Soul Divine Eyes, which went straight for Nie Donglio's head, trying to freeze his nascent soul. However, Nie Donglu was protected by vast Yang energy. Before the Ice Soul Divine Gaze could fully display its power, it was already neutralized by Nie Donglio's vast Yang energy. In terms of power, Han Baxian's vast Yang 9 Extreme's mystic art couldn't compare to Chu Xiu's 9 Heavens Fiend golden body. In fact, it couldn't even compare to the great Vajra strength. However, the only advantage of the vast Yang 9 Extremes mysterious art was that it was comprehensive. There was almost no obvious weakness to be found. Nie Donglio's fist came down with unparalleled power, sending Bai Wuji flying and smashing through the surrounding houses. Bai Wuji roared and swung his spear to the limit. Icy astral energy suppressed the soul. With Bai Wuji at the center, it was as if frost was flying in June, extremely cold. However, when facing Nie Donglu, even though Bai Wuji used his full strength, he still couldn't do anything to him. Golden astral energy shone in Nie Donglio's hands. He used the vast Yang 9 Extremes mysterious art to the limit. Bai Wuji, who was also good at close combat, was completely suppressed by Nie Donglu. Furthermore, Nie Donglio's heaven and earth cloud-reaching hands was a combination of hardness and softness. When the two were combined, his strength was clearly far greater than Bai Wuji's. At that moment, Bai Wuji was also filled with a sense of defeat. It was even more severe than when he was defeated by Shenbai. After all, Shenbai was just a stranger, while Nie Donglu and Bai Wuji had been fighting since they were children. Now, the gap between them was getting bigger and bigger. Bai Wuji roared. The spear in his hand was dyed with a blood-red light. The cold blood condensed and stabbed at Nie Donglu like a dragon. Nie Donglu shook his head and said, "It's no use, Bai Wuji. You've never admitted defeat since you were a child, but do you know what your biggest weakness is? It's that you can't see yourself clearly. I didn't fight you before because I didn't want to engage in meaningless fights. But if we really fight, do you really think you can beat me?" As soon as he finished speaking, Nie Donglio's hand turned upside down. Golden astral energy condensed into a vortex, spiraling and twisting. It actually crushed the spear in Bai Wuji's hand. Bai Wuji coughed up a mouthful of blood and retreated. Nie Donglio's eyes flashed with killing intent. In the past, no matter how much Nie Donglu fought with Bai Wuji, Nie Donglu would control things to a certain extent because he didn't want things to get out of hand. The northern floating snow city and the Morgue village were both major northern Yen sections. At that time, the two sides were not connected yet, so there were no major conflicts. If Nie Donglu had killed Bai Wuji at that time, the northern floating snow city would definitely fight to the death with the Morgue village. But now, the northern floating snow city had joined forces with the Chilean village to trick the Morgue village, causing the Morgue village, a powerful alliance, to suffer heavy losses. The two sides had already become sworn enemies. At this time, Nie Donglu had no intention of holding back. However, at that moment, a surge of demonic energy appeared behind Nie Donglu. He turned around abruptly, and a strange Dharma idol formed entirely out of astral energy appeared behind him. The left side was filled with demonic flames, while the right side was shimmering with Buddhist light. The Dharma form's palm descended, and the devil and Buddha merged into one. The powerful force shocked Nie Donglu, and he immediately burst out the strongest power of the vast Yang 9 Extremes mysterious art to resist. Boundless golden astral energy enveloped Nie Donglu, making him look like a small sun. But under Chu Xiu's Mara Vajra form, the golden astral energy around Nie Donglu suddenly shattered. Nie Donglu himself spat out a mouthful of blood and looked at the person in front of him in horror. "It's him!" Nie Donglu recognized the identity of the person in front of him. Of course, he did not recognize Chu Xiu, but Lin Ye's identity. In the past, on the battlefield of the righteous and demonic path on Mount Floating Jade, it was this person who killed Xiahou Wujiang and made Xiahou Jin extremely furious. At this moment, Nie Donglu also understood everything. It was not the Chilean village that had colluded with the northern floating snow city, but the Chilean village that had colluded with the hidden devil clan. But Nie Donglu still vaguely remembered that during the battle of the righteous and demonic path on Mount Floating Jade, this person was only at the Five Chi's origin realm. Now, he had actually reached the unity of heaven and man realm, and the strength he displayed was so terrifying, it was shocking. After coming to a realization, Nie Donglu did not say a word, but immediately turned around and fled. With Nie Donglio's current strength, he was absolutely confident that he could fight against some unity of heaven and man realm martial artists. But this person in front of him was someone that the Hidden Devil clan focused on cultivating. When he was in the unity of heaven and man realm, he could probably fight against a martial Dao grandmaster. If Nie Donglu fought him head-on, he would be courting death. However, Nie Donglu did not notice that at this moment, Chu Xiu's eyes were also flashing with a cold, murderous intent. The way he looked at him was almost exactly the same as the way Nie Donglu looked at Bai Wuji just now. Chu Xiu and Nie Dongliu's enmity had been formed from the beginning. He did not forget how miserable he looked when he was being hunted by the memorial village. Chu Xiu had never been a broad-minded person. He had to take revenge for this. However, after so many times, either the timing was not right, or Nie Donglu was too slippery. Chu Xiu had never found a chance to kill him. This time, Nie Rinlong and Han Baxin were entangled, and Nie Donglu was isolated and helpless. It could be said that this was the best time for Chu Xiu to make a move. If Nie Donglu did not die this time, it could only be said that he was also a person with luck, and his luck might even be stronger than Lu Fengxian's. Looking at Nie Dongliu's figure, Chu Xiu formed a seal with both hands. His mental energy turned into endless threads, intertwining layer by layer, rushing towards Nie Donglu and wrapping around his primordial spirit. 9 major forms of soul assimilation, soul string web. In the past, when Chu Xiu's mental energy was weak, he could only use the soul string web to gather information. Now that Chu Xiu used the soul string web again, Nie Dongliu's figure suddenly stopped. He felt as if his soul was about to be pulled out from his body. Nie Donglu roared. His body was full of bloody light, and he actually burned his qi and blood to completely break free from the soul string web. He was very decisive. Unfortunately, it was still useless. Chu Xiu's figure was already close. He formed a seal with both hands, and a powerful and fierce aura condensed into a prison-suppressing Wisdom King Dharma. Holding the Wisdom King seal, he smashed it down on Nie Dongliu's head. The image of the prison-suppressing Wisdom King was extremely powerful. When it landed, even the world's Yuan Qi gave off an explosive sound. It really did have the powerful charm of a Wisdom King suppressing a prison and slaying a devil. In fact, among the Dharma powers of the Great Vajra divine power, the one that Chu Xiu imitated the most was the Mara Vajra form. Because he was a dual cultivator of devil and Buddha, Chu Xiu could use at least 90% of the power of this Dharma idol. After all, the other Dharma idols were condensed by others. It was a little difficult for Chu Xiu to experience their charm. And this prison-suppressing Wisdom King Dharma, Chu Xiu could use 90% of its power and 10% of its charm. This was all thanks to Zhongxian. Zhongxian was famous in the Jianghu for his Wisdom King seal. However, Zhongxian had evolved the simplest Wisdom King seal into countless uses, including the prison-suppressing Wisdom King. When Chu Xiu fought with Zhongxian, he had experienced the terror of Zhongxian's prison-guarding Akalanatha seal and had gained some understanding of it. Therefore, he borrowed Zhongxian's prison-guarding Akalanatha seal to complete his prison-guarding Akalanatha form. Under the prison-suppressing Wisdom King Dharma, Nie Dongliu's qi and blood burned. The heaven and earth cloud hand moved, and the golden stellar energy intertwined with the power of qi and blood. He wanted to block the seal, but under Chu Xiu's prison-suppressing Wisdom King Dharma, Nie Dongliu's stellar energy shattered in less than 3 breaths. His qi and blood dissipated, and his arms could not withstand the powerful force. They twisted and completely shattered, and his body was sent flying. It could be said that Nie Donglu was not only his son, but also Nie Rinlong's future hope, the hope of inheriting the morgue. Now, he had spent so much effort to scheme and lay a solid foundation for the morgue. Who was all this for? It was all for Nie Donglu. Now that Nie Donglu was dead, who would he leave everything to? Would he leave it to the other warriors in the morgue? The morgue could only belong to the Nie family. Bai Hantian narrowed his eyes at Nie Rinlong and said indifferently, "Manor Lord Nie, there is no need to be anxious. You and I have yet to determine a victor. This is a fight between the younger generation. Let them settle it themselves." Bai Hantian was actually happy to see Nie Donglu die, especially after seeing Bai Wuji lose to Nie Donglu. The major sects in Jianghu did not only look at the present, but also at the future, the victory of the next generation. I am not as good as you in this generation, but if I can cultivate an outstanding disciple in the next generation, that will be the time to decide the winner. Bai Wuji's strength and ability were not bad, but compared to Nie Donglu, he was much weaker. Therefore, Bai Hantian was also worried that the next Bai Wuji would not be able to defeat Nie Donglu when he took over the fluttering Snow City. Now that Nie Donglu was dead, it was exactly what he wanted. Get out of my way! Nie Renlong shouted angrily. The blood and qi in his body burned as he slammed his palm down, covering the sky and covering the sun. The universe reached the clouds, and his hand picked up the stars. Endless qi of heaven and earth and the power of blood and qi condensed in it. The powerful force made by Hantian's expression change. Was this guy crazy? Why was he so desperate? He did not know that a hypocrite like Nie Renlong was willing to sacrifice so much for his son. To burn his qi and qi so quickly, it was certain that his yuan qi would be greatly damaged. Nie Renlong wanted to fight with his life, but Bai Hantian did not. Therefore, the moment Nie Renlong attacked, Bai Hantian immediately formed a seal with his hands. Countless ice qi condensed around his body, like a mirror-like ice palace. It was densely packed and covered his body as he retreated. As the palm descended like a falling star, the powerful impact caused the ice mirrors in front of Bai Hantian to shatter one after another. His entire body was blasted away. However, at this time, Nie Renlong did not follow up with another attack. Instead, he went straight for Chu Xiu. Nie Renlong controlled the universe with both hands, and two forces, one clear and one turbid, condensed around him. They stretched for hundreds of feet, like two huge dragons, snaking toward Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu frowned. This Nie Renlong was really desperate for his son, Nie Donglu. Was he not afraid that he would not be able to save his son, and instead get himself into trouble? Bai Hantian was also a good-for-nothing. As long as he dared to fight Nie Renlong with all his might, he could wait until Chu Xiu killed Nie Donglu before launching a sneak attack from behind. Nie Renlong would die without a doubt, and this battle could even completely destroy the morgue. Chu Xiu was definitely not bragging. He now had the strength to fight a martial Dao Grandmaster, or rather, the strength to cause harm to a martial Dao Grandmaster. It was a pity that Bai Hantian was not a match for Nie Renlong in a head-on battle, but a sneak attack from behind was not a problem. It was a pity that Bai Hantian did not live up to expectations and wasted such a good opportunity. Seeing that the two dragons of earth energy were about to attack, Chu Xiu's eyes revealed a surging murderous intent. Today, Nie Donglu must die, and no one could stop him. In an instant, the murderous intent in Chu Xiu's eyes dissipated. Chu Xiu used the great art of mental demons rotation and the great art of extinguishing heaven and earth destroying soul to the extreme, causing Chu Xiu's eyes to become hollow and deep, like two abysses. Invisible mental energy condensed into an invisible seven-string zither in front of Chu Xiu. As Chu Xiu strummed the strings, a strange sound rang through the world. In the past, when Chu Xiu used the soul-suppressing Hades song, Chu Xiu had never overdrawn all of his mental energy to use it. This was the first time. The originally invisible soul-suppressing Hades song rang in everyone's ears. To ordinary people, the sound was a little intoxicating, but to Nie Renlong, it penetrated deep into his soul, causing the aura around him to dissipate. His aura became weaker and weaker, and even the two dragons of earth energy could no longer be controlled. They kept trembling and looked like they were about to shatter. The soul-suppressing Hades song could even silently extract one's primordial spirit and suppress them in the netherworld. At this time, Chu Xiu used the soul-suppressing Hades song at full force, and his face was pale. However, with the mask, no one noticed it. Nie Renlong's eyes were a little unfocused, and his aura was completely depressed. The two dragons of earth energy suddenly shattered. But at this time, Nie Renlong suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood and let out a long cry, completely interrupting the soul-suppressing Hades song. The invisible seven-string zither in front of Chu Xiu shattered, and the mental energy backfired, causing Chu Xiu to let out a muffled grunt, and a trickle of blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. Nie Renlong being able to break free from the soul-suppressing Hades song did not mean that his mental energy was stronger than Chu Xiu's. It was just that his willpower was too strong, to the extent that he could break free from Chu Xiu's mental energy secret technique with just his willpower. But it did not matter. In this short time, Nie Donglio's time of death had come. Chu Xiu stepped out and appeared in front of Nie Donglu in the blink of an eye. The powerful devil qi directly shattered Nie Donglio's protective upstanding qi, and his palm landed on Nie Donglio's heart meridian, completely shattering it. Looking at Chu Xiu in front of him, Nie Donglio's mouth moved, but he did not even say a word before he died. The one who knew you best was often your enemy. Chu Xiu had personally killed Nie Donglu. Perhaps he had already recognized Chu Xiu the moment Nie Donglu died. Of course, it was also possible that he did not recognize him, but that was no longer important. With his death, the grudge between Chu Xiu and Nie Donglu was completely over. If it wasn't for Chu Xiu, with Nie Donglio's considerable strength, as well as his schemes, the morgue would have been even more glorious under Nie Donglio's leadership. But now, the morgue didn't have a successor. So, the grudge between Chu Xiu and Nie Donglu was over, but the grudge between him and Nie Renlong was not. At that moment, Nie Renlong looked at Nie Donglio's corpse on the ground with a lifeless expression. His eyes were filled with disbelief. The son he had raised for more than 20 years had died here just like that? Just when he was ready to gradually transfer the power of the morgue to Nie Donglu had died here. Nie Renlong absolutely could not accept this outcome. He had stepped into the martial world when he was young, and even the brothers who had gathered with him in the past had died because of his schemes. Why did Nie Renlong do it? Perhaps it was because of the oath he had made when he was young and humiliated, to stand out from the crowd. With the current power of the morgue, Nie Renlong's oath had been fulfilled, but he was still not satisfied. He had been born in the wilderness, but he did not want his bloodline to be born in the wilderness forever. The morgue was a gathering in the martial world, but the person who organized the gathering had to have the surname Nie. But now, with Nie Donglio's death, everything had become an illusion. This made Nie Renlong feel despair, as if his mind was collapsing. Looking at Chu Xiu, Nie Renlong's eyes gradually turned crimson red. Even the colorless stellar energy around his body turned slightly black. This was the sign of him turning into a demon that would cause his cultivation to go berserk. Chapter 525. Chu Xiu cultivated the path of diabolism, so he naturally knew what it meant to be possessed by the devil. Only the heavens knew how much Nie Renlong valued Nie Donglu. He had killed Nie Donglu, but had triggered Nie Renlong into the devil? When he killed Xiahou Wujiang on floating Jade Mountain, Xiahou Zhen was only furious. His reaction was far less intense than Nie Renlong's. Or rather, this was the difference between having one son and many sons. At this moment, Nie Renlong was staring at Chu Xiu. Although Chu Xiu hadn't said a single word, the killing intent radiating from him had already been condensed to the extreme, to the extent that it could even affect the surrounding phenomena. The originally sunny weather was now overcast, and the atmosphere was oppressive to the extreme. Chu Xiu frowned and said to Bai Hantian, "Governor Bai, if you and I join forces and kill Nie Renlong, not only will the north have one less risk, but you can also let the northern fluttering snow city become the master of Liaodong." Bai Hantian thought for a moment and suddenly laughed. He then immediately shouted, "Disciples of the northern fluttering snow city, listen up, retreat immediately." Chu Xiu's eyes narrowed. He did not expect this scene. Bai Hantian, who looked like a straightforward and simple-minded guy, had actually played such a trick. Bai Hantian's thinking was very simple. He had achieved his goal, and he did not want to fight to the death with Nie Renlong anymore. After this battle, the morgue had been completely destroyed. Especially without Nie Donglu, the heir, it was easy to cause instability in the morgue. Therefore, the morgue had been destroyed, and they were no longer qualified to challenge the northern fluttering snow city. If that was the case, why would he waste his effort to kill Nie Renlong? Moreover, to Bai Hantian, Qilian Stockade Village was not a good place either. After settling the issue at the Memorial Hall, if Qilian Stockade Village were to be destroyed again, it would be best if both sides suffered heavy losses. Hence, at this moment, Nianlong's heart demon had entered his body and he had already fallen into a berserk state of qigong deviation. Bai Hantian could not wait for Nianlong to fight against this fellow from the Devil's Path and the Qilian Stockade until both sides suffer. Most importantly, Bai Hantian was afraid that if he killed Nianlong, it would affect the reputation of the northern fluttering snow city. Although Bai Hantian knew that Nianlong was a hypocrite, most people in Jianghu did not know. They still thought that Nianlong was the chivalrous villager Nie. Therefore, if Bai Hantian killed Nianlong, there would probably be many people in Jianghu who would curse him. Although it was not to the extent that Bai Hantian would lose a piece of flesh, it would not feel so good. At this time, in Jianghu, the Jianghu warriors had fallen into a fierce battle. Han Baxin was also enraged because his disciple had been killed, so he was suppressing Panghu. Yangbai City was Qi. Qi erupted. Yi Pang. He Liang. Bai Wu. Bai Rinlong's. Sensing Nianlong's murderous gaze, Chu Xiu knew that something was wrong. Demonic qi erupted from his body as he quickly retreated. Chu Xiu actually had some idea of how strong he was. When facing a weaker martial Dao grandmaster like Qiao Liandong, Chu Xiu still had some confidence to fight him to the death, but now facing a martial Dao grandmaster like Nianlong who was on the Fengyun list, fighting him head-on was simply courting death, especially when Nianlong was still in a state of rage. Seeing that Chu Xiu was escaping, Nianlong moved. Like a dragon, he leaped and appeared behind Chu Xiu. He held the universe in his hand and stirred the wind and clouds. In an instant, all the qi of heaven and earth around Chu Xiu was mobilized. The qi of heaven and earth turned into a whirlpool, pulling Chu Xiu toward Nianlong. Behind Chu Xiu, Nianlong's eyes were scarlet red. As his palm descended, pitch-black demonic energy fused into the huge palm made of astral energy. It was 1,000 feet wide and smashed towards Chu Xiu's head like a small mountain. There was no way to avoid it. Chu Xiu was surrounded by devil qi and Buddha's light. The Mara's Vajra took Nianlong's palm. However, just like Chu Xiu had crushed Nianlong, Nianlong was now crushing him. The palm fell and the Mara's Vajra shattered. Chu Xiu was forced to take a few steps back. He tried hard not to vomit blood. After turning into a demon, Nianlong's strength had increased exponentially. Missing his attack, Nianlong clenched the stars in his hand. Countless qi of heaven and earth pulled the qi of heaven and earth and smashed down like stars. The sun, moon, and stars rotated in Chu Xiu's eyes. He used the last bit of his mental strength to activate the heaven's sun gazing at air. The moment Nianlong clenched the stars, he immediately changed his direction and dodged. However, he could only flee in all directions. Soon, the ground was a mess. Looking at Bai Hantian, who was still watching from the side, Chu Xiu said coldly, "Bai Hantian, you gave up a chance to eradicate a great enemy. You will regret it in the future. What I hate the most are people who don't keep their word. Bai Hantian, I will make you pay for what happened today." Bai Hantian did not care about Chu Xiu's threat at all. It would have been fine if it had been a martial arts master from the Phaseless Demon Sect or the Shadow Demon Sect who said that. However, what right did Lin Yi have to say that? Even if Lin Yi became as accomplished as the little Celestial Master Zhang Qingjin in the future, the Celestial Master Mansion would not destroy a sect just for Zhang Qingjin. To Bai Hantian, Chu Xiu's threat was nothing more than cursing in exasperation. However, in reality, Chu Xiu had already begun to curse in his heart. The heaven's sun gazing at air also required mental strength to be used. However, when Chu Xiu used the soul-suppressing Hades song with all his strength, his mental strength was almost drained. Therefore, Chu Xiu had only used the heaven's sun gazing at air a few times before he had a splitting headache and could no longer hold on. This time, Bai Hantian had set Chu Xiu up. According to Chu Xiu's character, he would definitely remember this until the day the drifting snow city was destroyed in the far north. In fact, it was not that Chu Xiu was careless, but Chu Xiu did not expect Bai Hantian to have such a strange way of thinking. Bai Hantian had given up on a situation where he could have destroyed the morgue. Chu Xiu shouted at Pang Hu, "Leader Pang! Retreat. Pang Hu wanted to escape with the people of Qilian village, but Han Baxian said coldly, "You want to leave? You want to leave after killing my disciple? Leave something behind." Han Baxian's body shone with a dazzling golden light. He used his fists, palms, and fingers. All kinds of martial arts techniques were at his fingertips. Each of them was fierce and violent, and the power of battle and killing was displayed to the extreme. At this time, Nie Renlong's body was surrounded by black devil qi. Although he had fallen into a state of qi deviation, Nie Renlong had not yet suffered from the backlash. Instead, his strength had increased to a state that was even stronger than when he was at his peak. When the palm landed, it was as if Mount Tai was pressing down on him. The powerful qi sealed off all escape routes for Chu Xiu, forcing Chu Xiu to take it head-on. However, with his mental strength depleted, with Chu Xiu's current strength, even if he was willing to reveal his true identity and use all his trump cards, he still could not stop Nie Renlong. With a loud bang, the gang qi around Chu Xiu shattered and he was sent flying by Nie Renlong. A stream of blood flowed down his mask. Sensing the strength of that power, Chu Xiu's entire body was instantly shrouded in a bloody mist. He secretly formed the inner binding seal, and his speed and power erupted to the extreme. From the looks of it, it was the demonic path's secret technique, the blood escape. If an ordinary person encountered such a situation, they would definitely not choose to give chase. When his speed was at the extreme, the person behind him would definitely have to choose to use a secret technique to catch up. As a result, it would become a mutual exhaustion, and it was not worth it. However, at this time, Nie Renlong's rationality was almost gone. There was only one obsession left in his mind, and that was to kill Chu Xiu. Therefore, at this time, Nie Renlong did not care about anything else. His qi and blood burned, gang qi and devil qi lingered behind him, and his speed exploded to the extreme, chasing after Chu Xiu. Nie Renlong did not know any secret techniques related to speed, but he was a martial Dao master after all. The power brought by burning his qi and blood was much higher than Chu Xiu's, so his speed was not inferior to Chu Xiu's. Burning his qi and blood, coupled with the internal binding seal, almost in the blink of an eye, the two of them disappeared. Bai Hantian muttered behind him, "Madman! I didn't expect Nie Renlong to have such a crazy side to him." Behind Bai Hantian, Bai Wuji really wanted to ask his father if he was killed, would he be like Nie Renlong, who would do everything in his power to take revenge for him? However, after thinking about it, Bai Wuji did not ask this question. Nie Renlong only had one son, Nie Donglu, and he had poured too much effort into Nie Donglu. That was why he was so crazy at this time. However, Bai Hantian had more than one son. If Bai Wuji died, at worst, he could find another son to raise. The far north floating snow city had been passed down for thousands of years, and its foundation was deep. As long as the heir was not such an idiot, even if he was a little mediocre, the far north floating snow city would be fine. If this question was asked, both sides would be embarrassed, so Bai Wuji rationally did not say anything. Meanwhile, on Pang Hu's side, he was also fighting with Han Baxian for real. Han Baxian dared to fight with his life, so did he not? Therefore, Pang Hu also began to fight with his life on the line. Both sides fought fiercely for more than 10 moves, and it ended in a lose-lose situation. Although Han Baxian was angry that his disciple had been killed, he was not Nie Renlong after all. He was not willing to risk his life for Nie Donglu. Therefore, after he was injured, Han Baxian did not continue to fight and could only watch as Pang Hu left with his men. The rest of the martial artists from the Manor of Loyalty were perplexed. The young master was dead, and the manor master had gone missing due to qi deviation. Where should they go? Only Bai Hantian had a smile on his face. For this battle, his Drifts Now city was the final victor. The manor of the manor of the manor and the Qilian village bandits had both suffered heavy losses. This time, the far north floating snow city was completely peaceful. Chapter 526. It did not feel good to be chased by someone. It was even worse to be chased by a martial Dao master. In just a few months, the feeling of being chased by two martial Dao masters was quite unpleasant. That was how Chu Xiu felt at the moment. It was just that when he was chased by Qiao Liandong in the past, Chu Xiu was still confident that he could turn around and fight back, but now that he was facing Nianlong, Chu Xiu did not even have a chance to fight back. Therefore, when facing Nianlong's pursuit, Chu Xiu only had one choice, and that was to drag it out until Nianlong could no longer afford it. However, Nianlong had completely entered qi deviation at the moment, and his state of mind had been filled with obsession. At this time, it was useless even if Chu Xiu dragged it out. Nianlong would definitely not be satisfied if he did not kill Chu Xiu. Qi and blood power was burning rapidly, and it had already consumed some of Chu Xiu's vitality. However, Nianlong was still chasing closely behind him, and his face was extremely pale. Nianlong was a martial Dao master, and Chu Xiu also had a strong physical body. Therefore, Nianlong would not be able to gain any advantage by doing this. In the end, both sides would only suffer losses. However, Nianlong, who was only left with obsession, could not think of that at all. The only thing he could think of was to kill Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu frowned. Nianlong wanted to die with him, but Chu Xiu did not want to die with Nianlong. After escaping for 15 minutes, Chu Xiu's figure suddenly came to a halt, and the qi and blood power around him erupted to the extreme in an instant. However, he did not continue to accelerate and escape. Instead, he used the qi and blood power to stab his mental strength, causing Chu Xiu, who had just recovered a little mental strength, to completely overdraft his strength. The rotation of mental demon was cast silently, but Chu Xiu's eyes were like a deep abyss, completely pulling Nianlong's mental strength into it. As the name suggested, the rotation of mental demon could even use mental strength to trigger the opponent's mental demon after mastering it. It was extremely evil and could kill people without them knowing. Under normal circumstances, the great art of mental demon's rotation was used to create illusions and stir up the opponent's inner demons. However, Nianlong had already fallen into a trance. Chu Xiu's use of the great art of mental demon's rotation was not to attack, but to help Nianlong resolve his trance. In the illusion, Nianlong's life's memories were evoked. There was his yearning for chivalry in Jianghu during his childhood, the nervousness when he first stepped into Jianghu, the heroism when he became sworn brothers with good friends, the indignation when he was humiliated, and the complete change of his state of mind. For the sake of benefits, he did not hesitate to plot against his sworn brothers in the past. In the end, he built up the prestige of the morgue, but his heart was already as hard as stone. This was the real Nianlong, and it was the portrayal of his life. Whether human nature was good or evil, no one could say for sure. However, no one was born a good person, and no one was born a bad person. Nianlong was like this. He had been a good person and a bad person. Even now, there were people who scolded him in Jiujiu, but there were more people who appreciated his kindness. Immersed in the boundless memories, the demonic aura around Nianlong's body gradually dissipated. However, at this moment, he took a few steps back and vomited a large mouthful of blood. Even his body was covered in cracks, some of which were so deep that his bones could be seen. The reason why Nianlong was able to possess such strength after his cultivation went berserk was because of his obsession and demonic qi. Even if he killed Chu Xiu in the end, he would not be able to survive. Now that Chu Xiu had helped him get rid of the state of qi deviation, without the support of devil qi and obsession, Nianlong did not die, but the hidden dangers of qi deviation had erupted in an instant, causing Nianlong to completely lose the ability to fight, and he no longer had the ability to chase after Chu Xiu. Sometimes, saving someone was saving oneself. Chu Xiu saved Nianlong, but it was for the sake of his own survival. At this time, Chu Xiu, who had overdrawn all his mental strength, was as pale as a dead man, and his mind was a mess. He only had one last thought left, and that was to escape back to the Guanzhong torture room. Nianlong stimulated the last bit of his strength to escape. Although there was no devil qi in his eyes, Nianlong was still full of murderous intent, but he was powerless. Closing his eyes, Nianlong let out a long sigh. His son was dead, and the morgue had suffered heavy losses. Now, he was also seriously injured, and he would not be able to recover without a year and a half. But it was not a loss for the morgue to be destroyed by such a person. A person who could think of saving himself by saving his opponent at the critical moment of life and death. His state of mind was terrifyingly calm. At this time, a faint sound came from behind. Some warriors of the morgue and the forces of the Morgue Alliance who had not died also rushed over with their people. Although they did not know what to do before, after calming down, they could only search along the route that Nie Renlong used to chase after Chu Xiu. They did not expect to find Nie Renlong. However, when they saw Nie Renlong's injuries, they were shocked. "Manor Lord, are you okay?" Nie Renlong waved his hand and said in a tone without any emotion, "I'm fine. This time I lost, and so did the Morgue Alliance. Let's go back to Yendong." Whether it was the people of the morgue or the other forces in the alliance, their faces became extremely ugly. It was not easy to get the territory of Liaodong Prefecture, but in the end, they had to give it up in just a few days. Most importantly, they had suffered heavy losses this time. If they withdrew now, it could be said that they had suffered a great loss. But at this time, Nie Renlong suddenly said, "Send someone to Wine Sweeping Building and ask them to help me release a message to the whole Jianghu to hunt down Lin Yi of the Yinma clan. If anyone can kill Lin Yi, I will worship him as my master and give up the position of the Manor Lord." As soon as he said that, everyone present was shocked. Has Nie Renlong gone mad? Although the mortuary manor was heavily damaged this time, Nie Renlong was not dead yet. There were also many warriors in the mortuary manor. Even if they lost some of their essence, they could recover in a few years. But now, Nie Renlong wanted to give up his position as the manor lord to kill a person. If he was not crazy, then what was? Nie Renlong said expressionlessly, "Do you all think I'm crazy? Let me tell you now, I'm not crazy. Now that Dong Lu is dead, who can I hand over the morgue to in the future? Whoever helps me to avenge my son will be the new manor lord of the morgue." Everyone present was silent. At this time, they believed that what Nie Renlong said should be true. Because in the past, although Nie Renlong did not say it clearly, everyone knew that the morgue was hereditary. The position of the manor lord could only be surnamed Nie. The so-called training of talents and so on were actually to train Nie Donglio's trusted subordinates. But now that Nie Donglu was dead, Nie Renlong's heart was dead. Using the position of Manor Lord to avenge his son's death was worth it to Nie Renlong. 3 days later, what happened in Liaodong Prefecture had spread throughout the Jianghu. Wind Sweeping Building was very powerful. If there was a very important message, Wind Sweeping Building could directly use the formation to transmit it to the whole Jianghu within 3 days. At this time, Nie Renlong hated Chu Xiu to the core. Of course, Wind Sweeping Building was willing to pay a high price for Wind Sweeping Building to transmit the message through the formation. Originally, the actions of the Morgue village did not cause any commotion even in northern Yen. After all, it was normal for a sect like the Morgue village to wage war and attack. It was just that the Morgue village had always been obsessed with fame, so they did not take any action. Now that the Morgue took action, no one would care as long as the target was not them. Therefore, whether it was the Imperial Court of the Northern Yen, the Divine Martial School of Southern Yen, or the Huangfu family of Western Yen, they did not have any reaction when they heard the news. But no one expected that the Morgue would fall into such a situation. The Morgue Alliance, which had a strong momentum, had completely collapsed. The Morgue was directly hit hard, and even Nie Renlong himself had been seriously injured. And Nie Donglu, a famous young hero in the whole Jianghu, had died in the hands of the diabolism, which made many people sigh. For a sect like the Morgue that rose from the wilderness, the thing they were most afraid of was the problem of the successor. Because their foundation was too weak, even if they rose because of one person, they could also be destroyed because of one person. Nie Donglio's strength and means were considered to be the top figure among the young generation. With him inheriting the Morgue, people could already foresee that the Morgue would definitely be stronger than it was now, and its foundation would also be more stable. But now that Nie Donglu was dead, the future of the Morgue was not so obvious. But what really caught people's attention was the condition that Nie Renlong had offered. Whoever killed Lin Yi could become the leader of the Morgue. That was the Morgue of the 6 gangs of Renhe, one of the top forces in the Jianghu. Although it was seriously injured this time, its strength was still there. When the news came out, it caused an uproar in the whole Jianghu, and the name Lin Yi was also known in the Jianghu. One could not help but admire Wind Sweeping Tower's intelligence system. Almost all the information about Lin Ye's identity had been dug out by Wind Sweeping Tower. Whether it was the matter of targeting the morgue, or his performance in the battle between the righteous and diabolism on Floating Jade Mountain, or even the things that Chu Xiu said and did as Lin Yi during the Diabolism Alliance meeting, all of them were exposed by Wind Sweeping Tower. During the Diabolism Alliance meeting, there was Wei Shuya, a powerhouse in the true fire refinement realm. No matter how strong Wind Sweeping Tower's anemophilia was, it could not find out what was going on. Therefore, Wind Sweeping Tower could know the details of the situation. Obviously, there were spies from the righteous sects in the bright demon lineage or the hidden demon lineage who leaked the information. Spies and disguises were not unique to the hidden demon lineage. Chapter 527. Ever since the righteous and demonic battles on Floating Jade Mountain, the demonic Dao had shown signs of rising. However, the Yinma clan was still very low-key. This was the Yinma clan's strategy. They would let the moon-worshipping cult and the bright demon clan take the limelight. It was more important for the Yinma clan to keep a low profile and accumulate strength. However, as Lin Ye's identity spread throughout the Jianghu, the Yinma clan also gained a lot of limelight. Moreover, Wind Sweeping Tower even placed Lin Ye's identity on the Longhu leaderboard. He was ranked 7th on the Longhu leaderboard, even above LV Fengxian and Yan Fian. The battle where Chu Xiu killed Nie Donglu did not actually add much to his achievements on the Longhu list. After all, Nie Donglu was already ranked outside the top 10. However, in the end, Chu Xiu was able to escape Nie Renlong's desperate pursuit and even seriously injure Nie Renlong. This was very shocking. Although Nie Renlong's injuries were mainly caused by his cultivation going berserk and his own backlash, to be able to escape in such a state and almost exhaust Nie Renlong to death, it was reasonable for Wind Sweeping Tower to rank him 7th on the Dragon and Tiger leaderboard. In fact, there were not many demonic Dao elites on the Longhu list. This was also the result of Wind Sweeping Tower's deliberate suppression. For example, Yi Tianxia from the Evil Pole sect had refined the Blood Dragon's Niden and cultivated the Blood Dragon Heart Sutra as a human. Wind Sweeping Tower should be able to easily calculate that even if Yi Tianxia was not in the top 5 on the Longhu list, he could at least be in the top 10. However, Wind Sweeping Tower turned a blind eye to this. There was also the moon-worshipping cult's Holy Maiden. Although she did not have the experience of fighting alone during the righteous and demonic Dao battles on Floating Jade Mountain, her goo insects had caused many casualties. Moreover, none of the moon-worshipping cult's holy maidens were simple people. Wind Sweeping Tower knew all these things, but they did not rank them on the Longhu list. This was not because Wind Sweeping Tower was unfair, but because of the situation. Currently, the righteous Dao was very powerful. If all the people on the Longhu list were demonic Dao demons, what would that look like? Therefore, some deliberate suppression was unavoidable. However, with everything that Chu Xiu had done as Lin Yi, coupled with the fact that Nie Renlong had already announced the bounty to the entire pugilistic world, it would be inexcusable if a demon Dao elite like him, whose life was worth the position of the Manor Master, was still unable to enter the Longhu leaderboard. However, at this moment, Chu Xiu was unaware of all of this. At this moment, he was hiding within a barren mountain in the south of Swallow Mountain to recover from his injuries. After exchanging 2 moves with Renlong, Chu Xiu was only slightly injured. It could only be regarded as a minor injury. He would be fine after a few days of recuperation. The real problem with Chu Xiu was the consumption of his spiritual power. Under the premise that his spiritual power was almost depleted, Chu Xiu had overdrawn his spiritual power to use the mental demon rotation technique. This was simply adding insult to injury to Chu Xiu's spiritual power. Now, Chu Xiu had even injured the foundation of his primordial spirit. If he was not careful, it was very likely that it would leave a permanent injury. Therefore, after recuperating for a month, Chu Xiu directly came out of seclusion and prepared to return to Guangzhou. It was useless no matter how he tried to heal the injuries on his primordial spirit. It was better to return to Guangzhou first and think of a solution. However, because of the injuries on the foundation of his primordial spirit, not only could Chu Xiu not use his spiritual power, but even his perception had been suppressed to a level similar to that of an ordinary person. This was a little dangerous for Chu Xiu. A warrior's perception was undoubtedly very important. Otherwise, if someone sneaked up on you from behind, you would not be able to detect it. If you waited until the attack was already in front of you before you remembered to defend or block it, it would be too late. Chu Xiu did not know that Nianlong had made such a big move to kill him, but Chu Xiu could vaguely guess that the righteous manner would most likely put him on the wanted list in northern Yen. Right now, Chu Xiu only had his spiritual power and perception destroyed, not his martial arts. In fact, he was not afraid of the people from the righteous manor. Chu Xiu just thought it was troublesome. If the righteous manor put him on the wanted list, after killing one group, another group would certainly come. Being entangled was a small matter. What Chu Xiu was afraid of was his original identity being exposed. If Chu Xiu took off his mask and returned to the Guangzhou torture room with his original appearance, it would not be appropriate either. It would also arouse suspicion. After all, Chu Xiu was now punished to face the wall. Everyone in the Guangzhou torture room knew about it. Naturally, it could not be hidden from the outside world. However, now that Chu Xiu suddenly appeared in northern Yen, if someone wanted to think about it, they might be able to speculate some clues. Of course, it was not that Chu Xiu did not have a way. In fact, the simplest way was not to use the identity of Lin Yi or Chu Xiu. Instead, he could hide his identity and return to the Guangzhou torture room. Therefore, at night, Chu Xiu hid his breath and sneaked into a small town. He stole a set of ordinary linen clothes, slightly changed his appearance, and put on a mask and a bamboo hat. He randomly found an ordinary long sword and carried it on his back. Although it was a little strange, it did not attract attention. After all, there were all kinds of people in Jianghu. Some people might hide their appearance because of their strange appearance or because they were disfigured in a fight. This was also a very normal thing. After dressing up like this, Chu Xiu finally started his journey openly, ready to return to Guangzhou. At this time, in the morgue manor, Nianlong's face was pale and his breath was extremely low. However, he did not go into closed-door training to heal his wounds. Instead, he stared at an old man in Taoist robes in front of him and said in a hoarse voice, "Master Yuanji, can you really not calculate the whereabouts of that devil?" The old man in Taoist robes in front of him was a famous fortune-teller in northern Yen, the independent cultivator Yuanji. His nickname was 3 days without missing. It was said that Yuanji was a fortune-teller who could calculate everything that had happened in 3 days without missing anything, so he got such a nickname. At this moment, Yuanji said with a bitter expression, "Villa Lord Nye, you want this old Taoist to calculate a person's whereabouts out of thin air? This is simply impossible. Those who know everything under the heavens with a pinch of their fingers are immortals, not fortune-tellers. Moreover, the person you want to calculate is a great expert in the oneness of heaven and man realm. When a warrior reaches the oneness of heaven and man realm, he can borrow a trace of the power of heaven and earth. Although it is only a trace, it also means that he has a trace of power that is in harmony with heaven and earth. Calculating a warrior in this realm is like calculating the heaven and earth. The difficulty is more than 100 times that of a warrior in the 5 Qis origin realm. Also, I heard that Lin Ye's mental strength is extremely powerful. Even you have fallen into his trap. As a fortune-teller of my generation, we are most afraid of encountering martial artists with powerful mental strength. If we are not careful, not to mention divining the other party's information, we might even suffer a backlash. Since Lin Yi can make you suffer in terms of mental strength, I'm afraid the difficulty of divining him is no less than divining a martial Dao master. I really can't do it." Nianlong said in a deep voice, "Master Yuanji, you don't have to worry. Lin Ye's mental strength is indeed very strong. However, when he fought me, his mental strength was depleted. He was even severely injured. He can't be compared to when he was at his peak. It's definitely safe for you to calculate his whereabouts. You couldn't do it when Lin Yi was at his peak. Now that his mental strength has been damaged and he is severely injured, can't you do it? Yuan Ji hurriedly complained, but Manor Lord, I don't have anything now. What can I use for divination? Moreover, Yuan Ji was interrupted by Nieren Long before he could finish his sentence. Nieren Long said faintly, Master Yuan Ji, do you know the pain of losing a son? Do you know the pain of spending half your life nurturing a hope, only to have it die prematurely? Master Yuan Ji did not say anything. However, he thought to himself, I don't have a son. Of course I don't know. He wanted to have a son, but cultivating divination was equivalent to prying into the secrets of heaven. If he forcefully interfered with karma, he would definitely be punished by heaven. Therefore, the line of fortune-tellers was destined to be flawed. Master Yuan Ji was destined to be childless and live alone for the rest of his life. Therefore, even though he secretly kept more than 10 young concubines, he was living like a monk now. Since he was destined to be childless, he could not be bothered to think about or do anything else. Nieren Long said calmly, You won't be able to understand the despair and pain. All I want now is revenge. For that, I'm willing to give up my position as the Manor Lord. Master Yuan Ji, tell me, is there anything I can't do? Master Yuan Ji, it's fine if you don't want to do it for me. Why don't you do it for yourself? See if you can walk out of my gathering today. Manor. There was no killing intent in Nirenlong's eyes as he stared straight at Master Yuan Ji. However, his stare made Master Yuan Ji feel a chill run down his spine. It was only at this moment that Master Yuan Ji realized that the person before him was no longer the amiable and courteous village master Nye of the Morgue village. He was just a crazy father who wanted to avenge his son. In order to avenge his son, Nirenlong could give up his position as the Manor Lord. At this moment, he could disregard his reputation and make himself unable to walk out of the manor. A wise man submits to circumstances. Master Yuan Ji hurriedly said, Manor Lord Nye, don't be anxious. It just so happens that my cultivation has improved greatly recently. Even if I don't have my birth date or any related items, I can deduce some clues just by deducing the name. However, it will definitely be unclear. I hope you won't blame me, Manor Lord. Nieren Long nodded and waved his hand. Immediately, a large pile of violet gold, elixirs, and other items were moved to Master Yuan Ji's side. However, Master Yuan Ji felt even more pressured when he saw these items. It was obvious that if he could not deduce anything, these items would be used to buy his life. Therefore, Master Yuan Ji did not dare to be careless. He took out a compass, an array diagram, and lit up 3 extremely precious spirit-concentrating incense. He gathered his qi and started forming hand seals to deduce. The atmosphere in the room was extremely oppressive. Apart from Niren Long, the other warriors of the Manor Lord did not even dare to breathe loudly. After a long while, Master Yuan Ji suddenly opened his eyes and said in surprise, Manor Lord Nye, are you sure that demon's name is Lin Yi? According to the results of my deduction, Lin Yi is a fellow who has been dead for many years. Chapter 528. No matter how Master Yuan Ji calculated, he ended up calculating a dead person. This was something that Nieren Long absolutely could not accept. Seeing that Nieren Long's expression wasn't right, Master Yuan Ji quickly said, Villa Master Nye, it's not that I don't want to do mental divination, but this is what the divination says. Moreover, Manor Lord Nye, think about it. Lin Yi is from the Inma clan. Those fellows from the Inma clan are best at changing their names and hiding. We don't know Lin Ye's true identity, but what if the identity he revealed in the Inma clan was also fake? Nieren Long said coldly, Is there really no other way? Master Yuan Ji hesitated for a moment before saying, Actually, there is a way, but I'm worried that you won't be able to handle it. What is it? Has your son's body not been buried yet? Nieren Long nodded and frowned. Why are you asking this? Nye Donglio's body hadn't been buried. Nieren Long had sealed it in an ice coffin. He was going to bury Lin Ye's head with Nye Donglu once he got it. Master Yuan Ji glanced at Nieren Long's expression and said carefully, The path of divination emphasizes karma. Lin Yi killed the young villa master and was tainted by this karma. If I use the remaining blood qi in the young villa master's body to perform divination, the probability will be much higher. Niarenlong's expression was gloomy and he didn't say anything. After a moment of silence, Niarenlong said, "Bring the young villa master's coffin over." A moment later, an ice coffin was brought over with Nie Donglio's body lying in it. Since Chu Xiu had only shattered Nie Donglio's heart meridian, his body was still relatively intact. Master Yuan Ji said carefully, "Villa Master Nie, I'll start now?" Nie Renlong nodded. Grandmaster Yuan Ji let out a long sigh. He took out a golden brush, dipped it in gold powder, and drew strange runes on Nie Donglio's corpse. Finally, he formed a seal with both hands, and the golden runes trembled. There seemed to be the sound of blood flowing within Nie Donglio's frozen corpse. It was a very strange sight. Nie Donglio's frozen qi and blood were sucked dry by the runes. Nie Renlong's face contorted, but he didn't say a word. The golden runes shone brightly, and Grandmaster Yuan Ji's hands were also trembling non-stop. His hands' seals flew up, but all of a sudden, Grandmaster Yuan Ji's face turned pale, and his entire body started twitching. It was as if he was dancing. Nie Renlong frowned. Wasn't this Grandmaster Yuan Ji an orthodox Taoist fortune-teller? How could he even know the shaman sorcerer's trick of the Northern Plains barbarian tribe? However, before Nirenlong could ask, Master Yuan Ji suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. His face was as pale as a sheet as he muttered, "Impossible! Impossible! Absolutely impossible!" Nie Renlong looked at Master Yuan Ji, who seemed to be possessed, and shouted, "What's going on? Did you manage to calculate Lin Ye's whereabouts?" Grandmaster Yuan Ji seemed to wake up from Nie Renlong's angry shout. He revealed a strange expression that looked like he was crying and laughing at the same time. "The young master's corpse is closely related to Lin Ye's karma, and I've already deduced his whereabouts. However, because there was still some qi and blood left, I wanted to deduce Lin Ye's true identity. In the end, I saw something I shouldn't have." Nie Renlong frowned and asked, "What did you see?" Grandmaster Yuan Ji still had a look of disbelief on his face as he said, "I saw someone who shouldn't have existed. Previously, I deduced that Lin Yi had been dead for several years based on his name. I thought it was a fake name, and the result of my deduction was someone else. However, after I deduced the young master's karma, I realized that the name wasn't fake. It really existed, and the karma was implicated. Lin Yi, who had been dead for several years, killed the young master." Upon hearing this, the warriors from the memorial manor felt a chill run down their spines. Since Lin Yi had been dead for several years, then who was the person who had killed the young master? Could it be a ghost? With a horrified expression on his face, Master Yuan Ji continued, "This is simply unimaginable. I wanted to continue my deductions and see how Lin Yi died. I wanted to know if he was a human or a ghost. But in the end I saw a hand. That hand erased everything about Lin Yi. It was as if Lin Yi was just a memory that was easily erased by that hand. Lin Yi was already dead and didn't exist anymore. Therefore, when I deduced Lin Ye's name, I came to the conclusion that he had been dead for several years. My deduction wasn't wrong. I should say that from the moment that hand erased everything about Lin Yi, he was already considered dead." Nie Renlong looked at Grandmaster Yuan Ji and frowned. Nie Renlong was getting impatient with Grandmaster Yuan Ji's nagging. What hand? Erasing existence? What was that all about? This bunch of fortune-tellers played such mysterious tricks with others, yet they dared to play the same trick with him? Nie Renlong said coldly, "Don't talk so much nonsense. I don't care what happened to Lin Yi. I just want his head. Even if he's already dead, I want to kill him again. Where exactly is his current location?" Grandmaster Yuan Ji shuddered and quickly asked for a map of northern Yen. He drew a region on it and said, "It should be here. I can't deduce too much detail, but based on Lin Ye's speed, he won't be able to leave this place anytime soon." Nie Renlong picked up the map, got someone to carry the ice coffin, and left. Grandmaster Yuan Ji heaved a sigh of relief and sat on the ground, sweat dripping down his forehead. Grandmaster Yuan Ji wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and looked at the treasures that Nie Renlong had given him. A smile that was uglier than crying appeared on Grandmaster Yuanji's face. He had suffered a huge loss this time. That mouthful of blood just now cost Grandmaster Yuanji a full 10 years of his lifespan. Only the heavens knew what secrets Lin Yi had, and what kind of terrifying existence the hand that could erase a person's traces was. In any case, Grandmaster Yuanji had only taken a glance at Lin Ye's body, and the punishment was even more severe than peeking at heaven's secrets. He had actually lost 10 years of his lifespan. The items that Niarenlong had given him could not make up for the lost lifespan. Grandmaster Yuanji was really out of luck this time. He had already decided that he would take the items and leave Northern Yen. He would go to West Chu and seek refuge with a fellow cultivator from Longhu Mountain. Although that person was not a high-ranking member of Longhu Mountain, he was still a disciple of Longhu Mountain's Zhang family. Within Longhu Mountain's territory, there was no one like Niarenlong who would force him to have his fortune read, right? In a small town in the south of Yen, Chu Xiu's face was covered as he walked forward without saying a word. For the past few days, Chu Xiu had been traveling at full speed. If he had not been extremely hungry, he would not have even eaten. In any case, at Chu Xiu's current realm, it was not a big deal to not eat for a few days, let alone a few meals. However, Chu Xiu's mental strength had been destroyed, so he had to maintain his physical strength at its peak. However, when he was about to leave the small town, he was met with dozens of warriors from the morgue. They were led by a warrior who was at the unity of heaven and man realm. They quickly checked the warriors who passed by on the road. Grandmaster Yuanji could only calculate the approximate location of Chu Xiu. It was impossible for him to pinpoint Chu Xiu's location. However, for the morgue, this was enough. For the northern Yen, where martial arts were not as prosperous as Eastern Qi, there were not many warriors at the unity of heaven and man realm. Especially those who could cultivate to the unity of heaven and man realm as rogue cultivators, they were all famous figures. Therefore, the morgue only needed to check some unfamiliar warriors at the unity of heaven and man realm. Even if the morgue offended someone because of this, Niarenlong could not care less. In any case, rogue cultivators couldn't afford to offend the morgue village. If the morgue village offended some big sex martial artists because of this, those people wouldn't stoop to Niarenlong's level when they saw his crazy appearance. In such a small town, warriors at the unity of heaven and man realm were extremely conspicuous. However, in order to prevent people from hiding their auras, the people at the morgue still checked carefully. Naturally, Chu Xiu also had to hide his aura. Therefore, the cultivation he revealed was only at the three-flower realm. However, in the eyes of the people at the morgue, Chu Xiu's cultivation was still very conspicuous. Therefore, after seeing Chu Xiu, the warrior at the unity of heaven and man realm personally walked over, cupped his hands, and said, "Brother, the morgue is currently investigating the remnants of the demonic path. Please, brother, take off your mask and let me see your face." Looking at the person in front of him, Chu Xiu sighed. The warrior at the morgue suddenly felt that something was wrong. Why was this guy sighing? Of course, there was a reason for Chu Xiu to sigh. Originally, he wanted to return to Guangzhong in a low-key manner. He did not expect to have to kill again and attract a lot of trouble. It was really troublesome. The warrior suddenly felt a chill throughout his body. He felt as if he was being targeted by something terrifying. Just when the warrior was about to say something, the seemingly ordinary Jianghu wanderer in front of him suddenly erupted with a soaring demonic aura. The warrior at the morgue was suddenly shocked. At the same time, he exclaimed and immediately stabbed at Chu Xiu with his sword. Light blue gang qi suddenly burst out. However, Chu Xiu just stretched out a hand. A hand with monstrous demonic aura easily pinched the long sword. With a loud bang, the long sword was immediately twisted into pieces. Cultivating both the great Vajra divine power and the nine heavens fiend golden body, the current Chu Xiu's physical strength could not be said to be comparable to a divine weapon. At the very least, ordinary precious weapons were nothing in Chu Xiu's eyes. The warrior was shocked and wanted to retreat. However, at this moment, the blood in his body suddenly boiled and trembled, as if it was about to gush out of his body. This caused his body to suddenly freeze in place. Although it was only for a short moment, Chu Xiu's fist, which was tainted with a fierce demonic aura, had already blasted out and pierced through the chest of the warrior from the morgue. In an instant, blood splattered everywhere. The warrior from the morgue fell to the ground with a loud thud with a look of disbelief in his eyes. Only then did the other warriors from the morgue awaken. Chapter 529. With Chu Xiu's current cultivation, even if he didn't use his conspicuous cultivation method, it would be easy for him to kill an ordinary unity of heaven and human realm martial artist. Moreover, for Chu Xiu, some cultivation methods were not necessarily useless, such as the demon blood technique. As long as Chu Xiu didn't completely draw out the blood and qi from his body and use the blood-dissipating divine saber, who could recognize that it was the demon blood technique? Therefore, at this time, Chu Xiu also boldly used the demon blood technique. Under the cover of the devil qi, no one could see anything unusual. The rest of the warriors from the memorial manor stared blankly at Chu Xiu. In the next moment, all of them cried out in alarm and immediately turned to flee. They had to escape. The current Chu Xiu was somewhat beyond their expectations. Previously, these martial artists of the memorial manor also thought of the scene when they encountered Chu Xiu. Therefore, the people of the memorial manor didn't split up too much. Only a few unity of heaven and human realm martial artists led the search team. According to Nianlong, Chu Xiu was already seriously injured, and even his spiritual force was wasted. However, who knew that this Chu Xiu was so terrifying even without using his spiritual force? Killing a unity of heaven and human realm martial artist was like killing a dog. Sir Manor Lord had made them miserable this time. Chu Xiu took a step forward, and with a light movement he covered a distance of over 100 feet. He smashed down with a single hand, and it was just a simple punch. Demonic qi erupted, directly crushing and shattering some of them, forcibly blowing them up. In less than a quarter of an hour, more than 10 martial artists were all killed by Chu Xiu. However, Chu Xiu also frowned. Things seemed to be a bit tricky. Although he killed the people of the memorial manor, it was impossible to slaughter the entire town. The news must have spread. Northern Yen was not Western Chu. There were deep mountains and forests everywhere, and there were places to hide. At this time, Chu Xiu could predict that his own troubles would come one after another. Things were just as Chu Xiu had predicted. He was indeed in trouble. According to the direction calculated by Grandmaster Yuan Ji, the people of Righteous Manor had almost figured out Chu Xiu's approximate position. Now that Chu Xiu's whereabouts had been exposed, as long as Chu Xiu could not fly, it would undoubtedly be easier for the people of Righteous Manor to find Chu Xiu. And the trickiest thing was not that the people of the Righteous Manor found Chu Xiu, but other people. In order to kill Chu Xiu, Nianlong was willing to give up his position as the manor master of the Honorable Justice Manor. The temptation was too great. Moreover, the people of Jianghu were not worried that Nianlong would go back on his words, because if that happened, Nianlong would have no place in Jianghu. His reputation would be completely ruined, and even the morgue would be shaken because of this. Nianlong relied on his reputation to make a living, so he had to protect his reputation at all times. He couldn't let his reputation suffer any damage. If he couldn't keep his word, it would be enough to destroy Nianlong's reputation in Jianghu. Because of this, not only did many people from the northern Yen martial world want to take Lin Ye's head, but even many people from eastern Qi and west Chu had come to kill him. Although they all knew that Lin Yi was strong, and the Longhu list said that Lin Yi had fought against Nianlong for a long time, they were blinded by greed and knew that Lin Yi was seriously injured. Therefore, they still came one after another fearlessly. On a small road in South Yan's Plain Prefecture, Chu Xiu hid his aura to the extreme and walked in a low profile. He didn't even dare to use his earth energy too ostentatiously, afraid that others would notice something. His mental strength was crippled, and his senses were suppressed to the level of an ordinary person. This was very annoying, because Chu Xiu didn't know how many eyes were watching him in the dark. He didn't even know if he had been exposed or not. This feeling of not being in his control made him very uncomfortable. At this moment, Chu Xiu's body suddenly stopped, and he looked to the side. It wasn't because Chu Xiu heard something, but because there was no movement in that direction. It was frighteningly quiet. This was only a small road, so there were some messy shrubs and other things around. Usually, there would be some sparrows, insects, and snakes making some sounds, but now it was completely silent. As if he had seen Chu Xiu's gaze, a loud shout came from that direction. Kill! As the word kill was uttered, dozens of cultivators rushed out. They brandished their weapons and slashed at Chu Xiu with resplendent astral energy. Their might was extraordinary. Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes. He couldn't even find a martial artist at the unity of heaven and man realm. These people were really blinded by greed. They wanted to sneak attack him with just this bit of strength? As Chu Xiu punched out, demonic energy burst forth. However, there was a hint of golden light flashing around Chu Xiu's body. It was like the light of Buddha. While it was evil, it also gave Chu Xiu a sense of solemnity. Under Chu Xiu's punch, the man at the front had his earth energy torn apart, his weapon shattered, and with a loud bang, his body exploded into a cloud of blood mist. This was a true explosion. In an instant, more than 100 feet in radius was covered by an evil crimson mist. Chu Xiu's power might have awakened their hearts that were blinded by greed. Some people finally revealed a look of horror in their eyes, but it was too late. Chu Xiu was like a primordial beast as he crushed everything in his path. Moments later, all that was left on the path was a pile of horrifying broken limbs and minced meat. Chu Xiu then left expressionlessly. There were many ways to kill people, some beautiful and some not. In fact, Chu Xiu's way of killing people could be more beautiful. There was no need to make it look like a scene of dismembered corpses like this. However, he also wanted to shock the latecomers and let those idiots see clearly. Without strength, don't think about those trivial things. Otherwise, you only have one life. Don't blame me for being cruel if you die without a whole body. After an hour after Chu Xiu left, dozens of people came to the path. However, the strength of these dozens of people was much higher than those before. Among them, there were several martial artists at the unity of heaven and man realm. Seeing the horrible scene on the path, the expressions of those dozens of people changed slightly. A middle-aged man in a Taoist robe snorted coldly and said, "That devil Lin Yi is really cruel and merciless. These people acted too hastily and attacked before we arrived. As a result, they were killed by that devil." This middle-aged man in a Taoist robe was Immortal Miao Xian, the temple master of the Miaoyu Temple in the south of Yan River. There were several beautiful Taoist nuns behind him. His Miaoyu Temple had a good reputation in the south of Yan River. However, he was not an orthodox Taoist. He practiced the Tao of dual cultivation, which was rare in Taoism. He was the only man in the entire temple. The others were his female disciples. It could be said that they were his Tao of dual cultivation. A handsome young master in his 30s, dressed in embroidered clothes, and holding a folding fan in his hand said in a deep voice, "Everyone, you've all seen Lin Ye's methods. This demon is worthy of being able to help the survivors of the 36 great bandits of the northern region turn the tables. He's even an existence that almost caused Villa Master Nye to perish together with him. He's extremely difficult to deal with. At this time, we must work together to kill Lin Yi. Don't worry. As long as we kill Lin Yi, when I become the Villa Lord of the Morgue Village, all of you will be the heroes of this battle. I will share the Morgue Village with all of you." This young man was actually more than 50 years old. He was not much younger than Yarenlong. His name was Cui Lu, and he was quite famous in the south of Yan River. He was nicknamed Playboy. When he was young, he was one of the rare young talents in the south of Yan River. Although he was a rogue cultivator, his talent was not weak. It was said that he was fated to meet a princess of the northern Yan and almost became the emperor's son-in-law of the northern Yan. However, for some reason, the matter was left unsettled. Cui Lu had been hanging around in the south of Yan River. However, he had a wide circle of friends and made many good friends in the south of Yan River. Although Cui Lu was a rogue cultivator in the first half of his life, he lived a carefree life. Now, he was no longer young, and even his carefully preserved appearance had a trace of old age. This made Chui Lu feel a sense of crisis. He probably couldn't continue living like this, and it was time to find a way out for himself and his descendants. This time, he heard that Lin Yi was wanted by Nian Long. He was even willing to give up the position of the leader of Lin Yi. This made Chui Lu very tempted. Therefore, he made use of the connections he had made over the years and prepared to join forces to kill Lin Yi and become the owner of the morgue. The people present were all rogue cultivators. They believed that Nian Long would not reject them if they joined the righteous manor. However, they would be bound to some extent. If they followed Chui Lu to kill Lin Yi, then the Lin Yi would not belong to Chui Lu alone. It would belong to all of them. They would undoubtedly have more freedom. Therefore, whether it was for friendship or for their future, most of the connections Chui Lu had made were willing to help him. Behind Chui Lu, a burly man with a strong body and cultivation of the unity of heaven and man realms said in a low voice, "Brother Chui, you've seen Lin Ye's strength. He's very difficult to deal with. What should we do now?" Chui Li's eyes revealed a trace of coldness. He said, "Brother Mengang, don't worry. Lin Yi is now in the top 10 of the Longhu list. He is indeed an outstanding talent, but don't forget that he has been crippled of his mental strength. He is a blind dragon and a tiger without ears. Look at the traces on the ground. It is not too far from where they were lying in ambush to where they died. What does this prove?" This proved that Lin Yi had only discovered the whereabouts of this group of people when he was so close to them. His perception is probably crippled. Let's speed up and find a place in front of Lin Yi to set up a trap and kill him in one fell swoop. Brother Miao Xian, you are the best at setting up formations. This time, you have to work hard and set up a reliable killing formation. Taoist Miao Xian laughed heartily and hugged a plump Taoist nun beside him. He kneaded her bulging chest and said with a smile, "Brother Chui, don't worry. I'm very reliable no matter where I go. If you don't believe me, you can ask my disciples." Chapter 530. In the middle of the night, it was raining cats and dogs. Chu Xiu walked on the path in the rainy night with his gang qi protecting his body. The raindrops that fell on the gang qi were easily crushed by the gang qi and turned into mist. Thus, along the way, Chu Xiu left a trail of white mist on the path he took, which was very conspicuous. However, Chu Xiu was too lazy to cover up. Anyway, his whereabouts had been exposed. God knows how many people were ready to kill him in front of him and how many people were hanging behind him. Although his perception was gone, Chu Xiu still had a sixth sense. Anyway, Chu Xiu felt that there was killing intent shrouding him at all times. At this time, any strategy was useless. There were only two ways for Chu Xiu to survive. One was to kill his way out with his own strength, the other was to have a senior expert from the Yinma clan come to save him. Of course, Chu Xiu would not pin his hopes on the latter. The Yinma clan was not a group of good people. When they heard that he was being chased, they would come thousands of miles to rescue him, even disregarding whether they would be exposed or not. Moreover, even if someone came to save him, they would not come so quickly. After all, they did not know Chu Xiu's position. It was impossible to force a fortune teller to deduce it like the righteous manner. So even if someone from the Yinma clan came to save Chu Xiu, they could only wait for Chu Xiu's side to send the news. Who knew how many days would have passed by then? Chu Xiu would never put his life in the hands of others. So, Chu Xiu could only choose to be the first to kill his way out. Although he was being chased by so many people, it was not impossible to kill his way out. Nian Long was already half crippled and had no fighting strength. Later, Chu Xiu also heard some news that Han Baxian and Pang who were both injured, so the righteous manor could not send a martial Dao Grandmaster to kill him. As for the martial Dao Grandmasters who were rogue cultivators, they also looked down on the righteous manor's position. Martial Dao Grandmasters represented the power to establish their own sections. If they wanted to establish their own forces, they would have done so a long time ago. Why would they wait here to take over the righteous manor? There were various reasons why itinerant cultivators did not establish their own forces. The position of the manor master of the congregation manor was not enough to move them. Therefore, Chu Xiu was 99% sure that the person who wanted to kill him this time would not be a martial Dao Grandmaster. As long as the remaining people didn't charge at him at the same time, Chu Xiu was confident that he could kill his way out. Looking up at the sky, Chu Xiu let out a long sigh. Large raindrops fell, and Chu Xiu's forward footsteps suddenly paused. The raindrops that filled the sky actually changed shape at some point. The soft raindrops actually turned into conical sharp blades, and their speed suddenly increased countless times as they fell densely on Chu Xiu. A raindrop smashed into the ground and immediately made an explosive sound. It actually smashed a 1-meter-wide hole in the ground. It was easy to imagine what would happen if this raindrop smashed into a person's body. Chu Xiu's expression did not change. He formed a seal with his hand, and suddenly, a vast Buddhist light rippled out. However, this time, Chu Xiu's Dharma form did not condense into any Buddha statue. It was just a hazy shadow that enveloped all the raindrops, grinding and killing them. Great King Kong Divine Force, all rivers flow into the sea. It had to be said that once the Great King Kong Divine Force condensed into one's own Dharma form, it could be said to be ever-changing, and the results would be different for everyone. Although Chu Xiu had not truly condensed his own Dharma form, Chu Xiu could temporarily borrow the Dharma forms of the predecessors to deal with most situations. In the future, if Chu Xiu could really cultivate the Great King Kong Divine Force to the state where he could condense his Dharma form, he would probably not be any weaker than the predecessors. The endless raindrops were ground by the all rivers flow into the sea, and at this time, the ground under Chu Xiu's feet also began to change. The ground within a radius of several dozen feet cracked, condensed, and turned into long spears that shot towards Chu Xiu with the power of heaven and earth. With a casual punch, all the earthen spears were smashed into pieces. Then Chu Xiu stepped on the ground, and the Buddhist light around him turned into a monstrous demonic aura that enveloped Chu Xiu. His aura was incomparably ferocious, as if an ancient demon god had descended. 9 Heavens Fiend Golden Body. In fact, the 9 Heavens Fiend Golden Body did not reveal too many strange phenomena. When this cultivation method was cultivated to the extreme, it could only display a powerful physical body. Therefore, Chu Xiu was not afraid of being discovered when he used it. Most importantly, apart from Lu Fengxian and his 4 subordinates, no one in the Jianghu knew what the 9 Heavens Fiend Golden Body looked like. Even the level of the cultivation method was calculated by them. At this time, Chu Xiu had cultivated both the Great King Kong Divine Force and the 9 Heavens Fiend Golden Body at the same time. The strength of his physical body had even reached the level of a martial arts grandmaster like Nieren Long. As Chu Xiu stepped on the ground, there was a sudden loud rumble, and the ground began to crack. Chu Xiu took 9 steps in succession, and the ground within a radius of several dozen feet was already a mess. The formation on the ground shone brilliantly, but it exploded one after another, and finally dissipated with a loud bang. In the dark forest of the rainy night, Cui Lu and dozens of martial artists walked out. Cui Lu, who was in the lead, said with some dissatisfaction, "Dao brother Miao Xian, is this how you fool me? This is the annihilation of heaven and earth annihilation formation you mentioned? Was it so easily broken by the opponent? Did you take out the array formation that you have up your sleeve?" Dao Master Miao Xian explained, "This is already the strongest formation in my Miaoyu temple. How can I hide it at this time? Brother Cui, didn't you say that Lin Ye's perception has been destroyed? How was he able to detect my surprise attack from the formation?" Cui Li's face was gloomy, but he didn't say anything. "You ask me, but who do I ask?" However, it was obvious that the first step of their ambush had failed. They originally wanted to rely on the formation to trap and kill Chu Xiu first. At the very least, they wanted to seriously injure him. In the end, Chu Xiu was not injured at all, and he easily broke down Master Miao Xian's formation. This was clearly not in line with their plan. In fact, the reason why Chu Xiu was able to break the formation so easily was not because he had detected it in advance, but because Chu Xiu had been paying attention to his surroundings. It should be said that from the moment he killed the first group of people, Chu Xiu had been in a state of constant tension. Although his perception was gone, as long as any attack appeared within the range of his eyes and hearing, Chu Xiu would immediately detect it and take action. Looking at Cui Lu and the others, Chu Xiu said indifferently, "It seems that the warning I gave you before was not enough. Isn't it good to live well? Why do you have to come and die? A person's death is like an extinguished lamp. No matter how good something is, if you lose your life, you won't be able to enjoy it no matter how powerful you are." Cui Lu said indifferently, "Well said. However, there's another saying, fortune comes from danger. Lin Yi, I don't care who you are or what your strength is. Right now, you are our fortune. Although we have no enmity in the past, and to put it bluntly, I, Cui Lu, am not the kind of person who is willing to get rid of evil and uphold justice, but now that fortune is right in front of us, killing you will help us achieve our goal." Cui Lu was very straightforward. Unlike a hypocrite like Nieren Long, he was a real villain. He wanted to kill Chu Xiu, not to get rid of evil and uphold justice, nor to uphold justice, but because of Nieren Long's promise, the position of the Manor Master of Loyalty Manor. It was simple and direct, but it was irrefutable. Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said indifferently, "If you want fortune, then come and get it. I want to see who can get this fortune." As soon as Chu Xiu's voice fell, Cui Lu took the lead and rushed forward. Among the people present, Cui Lu was the strongest. Chapter 5:31. When one's strength reached a certain level, one could break through all methods. Now, Chu Xiu's method of raising his strength to the extreme without using martial arts was a bit of a waste of energy, but it was really useful. Moreover, the people who inspired Chu Xiu were Zhong Xian and Qinqing Di. Zhong Xian only cultivated the Bright King seal, but he was able to transform the Bright King seal into a shocking cultivation. No one knew what martial arts Qinqing Di had cultivated, but last time in the Dong family, Qinqing Di's fist had defeated the Dong family's patriarch, Dong Qikuan, had left a deep impression on Chu Xiu. One punch to break through all methods, no one could stop it. Now, Chu Xiu could only use the true meaning, and he could not comprehend that kind of powerful fist intent. However, with the help of Chu Xiu's strength, this punch already had a bit of Qinqing Di's flavor. On the other side, when Taoist Miao Xian saw that Chu Xiu had so easily smashed his horsetail whisk and long sword, he immediately screamed, "Disciples! Get into formation and attack. Lend me a hand." The role of Taoist Miao Xian's female disciples was not only that they could sleep with big breasts, they themselves were Taoist Miao Xian's dual cultivation partners, but they were not blindly demanding cauldrons, but yin and yang dual cultivation. The true qi and internal strength of both sides complemented each other, and could even be borrowed at a critical moment. When his female disciples heard this, they immediately formed a seal, stood in a row, and poured their internal strength into the body of the person in front of them, increasing one by one, and finally pouring it into Taoist Miao Xian's body. Although the whole process seemed to be complicated, it was extremely fast. Obviously, Taoist Miao Xian had often cultivated or used this move. His hands formed two seals, and Taoist Miao Xian's mouth spat out a mantra. In an instant, like a thunder explosion, it resounded in Chu Xiu's ears. It was somewhat similar to the Buddhist lion's roar and Chu Xiu's outer lion seal. However, although Chu Xiu's mental strength was in a state of being overdrawn and injured, his foundation was still there. Therefore, Chu Xiu's body only moved slightly when the thunderous sound pierced his ears, and he returned to normal. At this time, Taoist Miao Xian had already formed two seals. One clear and one turbid Gang Qi turned into yin and yang Tai Chi power and appeared in front of him, wanting to block Chu Xiu. However, under Chu Xiu's invincible punch, the giant shield condensed from yin and yang Tai Chi power shattered. However, at the same time, the aura of Chu Xiu's punch finally dissipated, and he was unable to take another step forward. Although Taoist Miao Xian's attack had blocked Chu Xiu's punch, he was still heavily injured by the force. He and the dozen or so female disciples behind him spat out a mouthful of blood as shock flickered in their eyes. Chu Xiu had never been a person who had tender and protective feelings for the fairer sex. He was more like ruthlessly destroying a flower. Therefore, Chu Xiu did not show the slightest mercy in this attack. Taoist Miao Xian was seriously injured, but the female disciples behind him were even more seriously injured. Some were even directly killed by Chu Xiu on the spot. After all, Taoist Miao Xian was a great master in the unity of heaven and man realm. Among the female disciples under his command, there were actually only a few who had stepped into the three-flower realm. Seeing that Chu Xiu had already stepped forward, Taoist Miao Xian was scared out of his wits. He didn't even care about the female disciples who had already died. He frantically fled in one direction. Chu Xiu secretly released the power of the binding seal. In less than 3 steps, he had already appeared behind Taoist Miao Xian, intending to kill him with a punch. However, at this time, a strong man with a beast-like violent aura collided with Chu Xiu's fist. In an instant, the Gang Qi exploded, and the two figures quickly retreated. However, Chu Xiu only retreated 3 steps, while the strong man retreated dozens of steps. This strong man was called Meng Gang. He was not a warrior from the south of Yen, but a rogue warrior from the west of Yen. This person had once joined the military and was a bandit. He had also been a guest of the Huangfu clan, but it was not a long time. Because of his bad temper, it was easy for him to offend people. Therefore, he usually did not stay in any place for long before he offended the people around him. In the end, he could only helplessly leave. Cui Lu was one of the few people who could tolerate his bad temper, so the two naturally became good friends. Meng Gang was also one of the few people who helped Cui Lu not because of the benefits, but because of their friendship. Chu Xiu looked at Meng Gang and narrowed his eyes. His figure rushed towards Meng Gang again. His body was surrounded by Buddha's light, but the outside world was filled with demonic flames, making him look like a god or a demon. Punch after punch landed, and Chu Xiu completely crushed Meng Gang with his physical body. In the beginning, Meng Gang was still barely able to resist, but as time went on, the crisp sounds of bones cracking could be heard from his body. In the end, he was already spitting out blood from Chu Xiu's attacks, and even his arm was completely twisted. At this time, Cui Lu, who had recovered, shouted, "Everyone, attack together!" As his voice fell, Cui Lu stretched out his hand. His slender fingers moved continuously, and an ice flower bloomed. It was only the size of a palm, but there was no trace of Gang Qi in it. It was as if it was completely born in this world. But in the blink of an eye, the ice flower appeared above Chu Xiu's head and exploded. Thousands of cold needles shot out, straight towards Chu Xiu. Boundless devil flames rose up, and before those ice needles could even touch Chu Xiu's body, they were melted by the devil flames. However, after the ice needles melted, they turned into a cold mist that permeated every nook and cranny. It actually froze everything around Chu Xiu, making him feel as if he was in the middle of winter. Even Chu Xiu's true qi felt a little sluggish. At this time, the other martial artists also rushed over. Taoist Miao Xian, who was scared by Chu Xiu and fled frantically, also waved his hands, and his Gang Qi evolved into a yin and yang formation plate, smashing towards Chu Xiu. The dark night sky had been illuminated by various colors of Gang Qi. Within a radius of 100 feet, the raindrops were completely shattered by the Gang Qi before they could fall to the ground. The power of this attack was extremely shocking. A martial Dao Grandmaster would have an advantage in this kind of group battle. With the true martial Dan in his body, a martial Dao Grandmaster could erupt with his most powerful power without any scruples. Later, the true martial Dan would naturally quickly extract the heaven and earth Yuan Qi to replenish the consumption. Now that Chu Xiu had gone all out, his explosive power was not inferior to some weaker martial Dao masters, but his recovery ability was much worse than that of a martial Dao master. So for Chu Xiu, there was only one chance. This time, he had to completely defeat these people. In an instant, Chu Xiu's eyes were bloodshot, and he had already stepped into the selfless killing realm. Chu Xiu formed a seal with his hand, and his body was surrounded by bright Buddha light and monstrous demonic qi. The Mara Vajra was displayed, and the incomparably evil Mara Vajra directly enveloped everyone present. Vajra suppresses demons, incomparable strength, Mara bewitches heart, monstrous demonic flame. The two completely different powers were displayed to the extreme by Chu Xiu. It was not a combination of hardness and softness, but a separation of Buddha and demonic. Endless gang qi shattered under the suppression of the Buddha light, and the martial artists who rushed up were blasted away by the boundless demonic qi. Some of the weaker martial artists were even killed on the spot by the demonic qi entering their bodies. In the powerful gang qi storm, Chu Xiu's face was slightly pale. He had really used his full strength in that attack just now, directly urging his own strength to the limit that his physical body could reach, so that he could block the joint attack of these people. At this time, Chu Xiu's figure did not stop, and directly rushed towards Taoist Miao Xian. There were too many of these people, and their strength was generally good. Chu Xiu could not give them a chance to regroup again. He had to completely defeat them. At this time, Taoist Miao Xian was holding his chest and panting. In fact, in that attack just now, apart from the consumption of true qi, Taoist Miao Xian did not suffer any serious injuries. Among these people, Taoist Miao Xian was famous for being extremely cunning. Just now, when he saw that something was wrong, he immediately changed from offensive to defensive, so he was not injured at this time. However, seeing that Chu Xiu actually went straight for him, Taoist Miao Xian was so angry that he wanted to curse. Among these people present, the strongest was Cui Lu, and Cui Lu was also the organizer. If Lin Yi wanted to kill someone, he should kill Cui Lu first. Why was he staring at him? If Taoist Miao Xian knew that it was because of his appearance that attracted more hatred, he probably would not even have the mood to curse. Just now, Taoist Miao Xian had already seen Chu Xiu's strength, so he absolutely did not dare to go head-on with Chu Xiu again. At this time, seeing that Chu Xiu was attacking, Taoist Miao Xian did not say a word. His whole body was wrapped in yin-yang true qi, and his whole body floated like a willow in the wind, wanting to quickly retreat. However, at this time, strands of devil qi lingered behind him. In an instant, Taoist Miao Xian suddenly felt the blood in his whole body boiling. The burning pain immediately made Taoist Miao Xian let out a muffled groan, and his body stopped moving. Boundless devil qi enveloped Taoist Miao Xian. Strands of devil qi seeped into Taoist Miao Xian's body, pulling out his qi and blood. The pitch-black devil qi was mixed with scarlet qi and blood. That black-red color looked extremely evil and indescribable. Chu Xiu squinted his eyes. At this moment, he suddenly had a new understanding of the great devil blood technique. Stepping forward, Chu Xiu placed his hand on Taoist Miao Xian's head. In an instant, boundless devil qi erupted, and countless amounts of blood were forcibly pulled out from Taoist Miao Xian's body. His whole body turned into a pitch-black corpse, and he fell to the ground without a human shape. All along, Chu Xiu thought that the great devil blood technique was used to guide blood and qi, and as a supplementary technique, to provide power to the blood-dissipating blade. It was only now that Chu Xiu realized a new way to use it. The great devil blood technique used the word devil in front and the word blood behind. When the two were combined, the power that could be exerted was also incomparably overbearing. At this time, Cui Lu and the others saw the corpse beside Chu Xiu, which no longer resembled a human shape, and felt a chill in their hearts. So many of them had surrounded and ambushed him, but this guy had actually killed a warrior at the unity of heaven and man realm. How strong was this Lin Yi? Cui Li's heart sank. This didn't match his plan at all. Chapter 5:32. This battle had been a mistake from the very beginning. Cui Lu and the others had underestimated Chu Xiu and overestimated themselves. One wrong step led to many more mistakes. Cui Lu and the others were already half a step into the gates of hell. At first, they had wanted to ambush Chu Xiu, but now, it was Chu Xiu who had reaped their lives. Chu Xiu turned his head. No one could see the expression on his face, but they could see his scarlet eyes. As Chu Xiu stepped forward, wisps of demon qi drifted in the air. Even if the martial artists wanted to escape, once they were caught in the demon qi, their bodies trembled and their blood was sucked dry. The blood and demon qi lingered around Chu Xiu, causing the terrifying aura around him to grow stronger and stronger. It was as if a demon god had descended. The martial artists present finally couldn't bear it any longer and immediately scattered in all directions. However, Chu Xiu went straight towards Cui Lu. This fellow was the mastermind behind all this. The others could leave, but he had to stay here. Cui Lu clenched his teeth. Astral energy shimmered around his body as he rapidly formed hand seals. Thousands of strange flowers bloomed, each flower containing powerful fluctuations of astral energy. All of these flowers rushed towards Chu Xiu. Facing this attack, the boundless blood qi behind Chu Xiu condensed into the Dharma idol of the prison-guarding Wisdom King. With a single seal, everything returned to nothingness. A powerful force crushed down on Cui Lu, causing him to spit out a mouthful of blood. His face was filled with shock. At this moment, Meng Gang's entire body shone with a dazzling golden light. At the same time, strands of blood energy began to burn. He seemed to have transformed into the incarnation of a mighty god as he charged towards Chu Xiu. As he charged, he roared, "Brother Cui!" At the same time, several other martial artists who hadn't fled followed Meng Gang to attack Chu Xiu, all of them using their trump cards. Cui Lu wasn't a hypocrite like Nieren Long. He was a true villain, but even a villain would have a few true friends. Meng Gang had a bad temper. He only knew how to offend people, so he had no friends, only enemies and those who hated him. Cui Lu was one of the few people who could endure his bad temper and befriend him. Moreover, after Meng Gang offended others, it was Cui Lu who used his own connections to help him solve the problem. Regardless of whether Cui Lu regarded him as a friend or not, for Meng Gang, Cui Lu was his friend, his only friend. Benevolence, righteousness, and morality, Meng Gang lacked 3. He was not a good person, and he had never saved anyone. On the contrary, he had been a bandit and killed many passing merchants. In this life, the only thing he had left was loyalty. At the very least, when he was in the military, he had never betrayed his comrades. When he was a bandit, he had never sold out his brothers. Now that his friends were in danger, he, Meng Gang, could also fight for loyalty. A cold light flashed in Chu Xiu's eyes. The prison protector Wisdom King's seal fell down, along with the surrounding blood qi collected by Chu Xiu using the Great Devil Blood technique. The power of this seal was incomparably majestic, directly shattering Meng Gang's arms. The other martial artists who hadn't reached the unity of heaven and man boundary were directly killed by this powerful seal. Seeing this scene, Cui Lu couldn't help but be enraged. These people were his true friends. When Cui Lu said that he wanted to jointly manage the memorial hall with them, he wasn't deceiving them. Cui Lu really thought so. After wandering half his life, Cui Lu also wanted to have his own foundation, for his descendants, for his friends, to fight for a future. Unfortunately, he miscalculated, and this mistake turned everything into nothing. With Meng Gang blocking in front of him, he could escape, and there was a certain chance that he could escape. But Cui Lu still didn't take this last step. Instead, he roared angrily, and directly inserted his hand into his heart. In an instant, a large amount of blood flowed out. The blood flowed to the ground, but it evolved into a strange blood-red giant flower. It was as tall as a person, and the scarlet petals were incomparably magnificent, shining with a ferocious blood-red light. If someone from the Buddhist sects came, they would easily recognize this flower. It was called the red spider lily, also known as the red spider lily. It bloomed on the road to the yellow springs, sending the souls of the dead to their graves. The red spider lily bloomed, enveloping Chu Xiu. It represented the power of death, the power of hell that Cui Lu drew in with his own life. Under the blooming red spider lily, the blood qi melted, the demonic qi dissipated, and the power even made Chu Xiu's heart palpitate. This was no longer a life-risking secret technique, it was simply a move to perish together. At this moment, the prison-guarding Wisdom King's Dharma form behind Chu Xiu suddenly changed. Boundless blood qi and demonic qi merged into it, transforming the Wisdom King's Dharma form into the Buddha form. However, the Buddha form was blood-red, so scarlet that it sent chills down one's spine. The boundless demonic qi transformed into a demonic blade in the Buddha's hand. From the looks of it, it was somewhat similar to Chu Xiu's heavenly demon dance. The blood-red Buddha held the demonic blade. This was Chu Xiu's Dharma form, the killing demon Buddha form. As the blade slashed down, boundless demonic chi condensed into a sharp blade, directly cutting the blood-red spider lily into pieces, turning it into countless blood-red stars that dissipated into the night sky. Cui Lu was not dead yet. He forced himself to look at Meng Gang and opened his mouth, but no sound came out. However, Meng Gang could read one word from the shape of his mouth, and that was, run. After spitting out this word, Cui Li's body suddenly fell to the ground, lifeless. The red spider lily was a flower of death. Only his own death could cause the red spider lily to bloom. Cui Li had cultivated this flower for half his life, but when Meng Gang needed it, it would be the day of his death. Meng Gang did not escape. He only stared blankly at Cui Li's corpse. The killing demon Buddha form behind Chu Xiu dissipated. He took a step forward and appeared in front of Meng Gang. He said calmly, "I really admire people who are loyal." If a normal person said such a thing, the next sentence would definitely be, "Because you are loyal, I won't kill you." However, Chu Xiu said next, "Since you are so loyal, I'll send you on your way. Since the two of you can't be born on the same day, the same month, and the same day, you can die on the same day." As soon as he finished speaking, Chu Xiu directly shattered Meng Gang's heart meridian. Meng Gang did not resist. Perhaps to him, resistance was already meaningless. Looking at the corpses on the ground, Chu Xiu's expression did not change. Instead, he seized the time and left quickly. To Chu Xiu, there were only people he could kill and people he couldn't in this world. Although he admired these loyal people, "If you want to be my enemy, then I'm sorry, I still have to kill you." It was not easy for Chu Xiu to fight against so many people without his perception. He had consumed a lot of energy, so he had to recover to his peak first. Moreover, Chu Xiu had not expected that he would be the first to cultivate the great success stage of the Great Vajra divine power, which allowed him to condense his own Dharma form. Originally, Chu Xiu thought that he would need to reach the martial Dao Grandmaster level before he could comprehend and condense his Dharma form. However, he did not expect that he would be so lucky this time and actually comprehend the killing demon Buddha form. The foundation of the Great Vajra divine power was the cultivation of the physical body, but its true essence was the Dharma form that he condensed. However, it was estimated that even the creator of the Great Vajra divine power in the past would not be able to recognize Chu Xiu's Great Vajra divine power now. It was an orthodox Buddhist cultivation technique, but Chu Xiu ended up cultivating it in an extremely evil and messed up way. Just as Chu Xiu was hiding to recover his strength, the deaths of Cui Lu and the others caused an uproar. The previous batch of people who died were mostly nameless people, but Cui Lu and the others were not nameless people. Flower-bearing Cui Lu, Temple Master Miao Yu, Perfected Miao Xian, and Giant Spirit General Meng Gang were all famous experts in the northern Yan land. Martial artists at the Unity of Heaven and Man realm were all famous existences, and these three were considered experts even among the many Unity of Heaven and Man realm martial artists. In the end, they still died in the hands of Chu Xiu, and more than 10 lives were lost. This was like a basin of cold water directly poured over everyone's heads, and it also calmed those who were prepared to kill Lin Yi in exchange for a better future. It was only then that they seriously thought about it. If Lin Yi was really so easy to kill, why would Niren Long put up a bounty for the position of the Loyalty Manor's leader? Even if Niren Long was muddle-headed from anger, he would not be so careless. Cui Lu and the others were dead, but they were considered to have done a great service. Because of their deaths, a bunch of people who were about to die were saved. At that moment, in the Loyalty Manor, Niren Long was frantically throwing vases, tables, and chairs, and everything he could see. He failed again and again. Where did this Lin Yi come from? How many lives did he have? Why couldn't so many people kill him? The surrounding disciples of the Memorial Manor looked at Niren Long with trepidation. Since Nie Donglio's death, the usually calm and indifferent leader seemed to have changed into a different person. His temper became incomparably irritable and abnormally terrifying. After a long while, Niren Long roared, "I don't believe that we can't kill a demonic junior with all the strength of the Loyalty Manor. Go find Yuan Ji and have him continue to calculate Lin Ye's location. Then, find the Blue Dragon Society and pay them a large sum of money to kill Lin Yi." At that moment, a disciple of the Loyalty Manor said with a bitter smile, "Manor Lord, please calm down. Grandmaster Yuan Ji has already left, and I'm afraid he's already left the Northern Yen. And you also know the rules of the Blue Dragon Society. If we had hired someone from the Blue Dragon Society to assassinate Lin Yi before this, it might have been possible. But now Lin Ye's reputation has spread. If we hire the Blue Dragon Society to assassinate him, I'm afraid the price will not be much lower than assassinating a martial Dao Grandmaster. And you also know the rules of the Blue Dragon Society. If the situation changes and the Blue Dragon Society suffers casualties, it will be on the Loyalty Manor. Manor Lord, please reconsider." Chapter 5:33. Ever since Nie Donglio's death, even if Nie Renlong had recovered from his cultivation deviation, his personality would still become extremely irritable. The disciple's advice was right. Nie Renlong should calm down now, but Nie Renlong couldn't do it. The son that he had spent so much effort to nurture was killed, and the murderer was about to leave. How could he calm down? Looking coldly at the disciple from the morgue, Nie Renlong said in a cold voice, "Since Yuan Ji has run away, go find another fortune teller for me. Can't he be the only fortune teller in the whole of Northern Yen? If you can't find him, then go to the wind-sweeping pavilion and ask their fortune teller for a high price. You don't need to care about the Blue Dragon Society. I only want the results. I just want to see Lin Ye's head." With a loud bang, Nie Renlong's footsteps paused. The ground immediately cracked inch by inch, and the entire house was almost destroyed by Nie Renlong. The rest of the warriors from the morgue shivered. Nie Renlong was already on the verge of going crazy. Whatever he said, they had to do. Don't ever refute him. The storm in Jianghu hadn't completely dissipated, but at this time, Chu Xiu had already recovered his qi and was ready to go. Chu Xiu did not know if the deaths of Cui Lu and the others had alerted the people behind him, or if Nie Renlong had given up on hunting him down. Chu Xiu walked for a few days and did not encounter anyone who tried to stop him. He did not even see the people searching for him at the Memorial Manor. After a few days of rushing, Chu Xiu noticed that he was hungry, so he found a small town to buy some food. Even in a crowded place, no one recognized Chu Xiu. To be more accurate, no one continued to pursue him. However, Chu Xiu didn't slow down because of this. He still hurried at his fastest speed, but also didn't consume too much energy in his body. In the evening, Chu Xiu looked at the sky. It was overcast, and he was afraid that it would rain again. Chu Xiu was not afraid of the rain, but he was a little hungry at the moment. So he looked around and found an abandoned Taoist temple by the side of the road to rest and eat something. At this moment, Chu Xiu was not the only one in the Taoist temple. There were also a few Jianghu escorts and a group of merchants who seemed to be from a small family. The two groups of people were clearly separated. The escorts were born in the Jianghu and were more vulgar. A group of people roasted rations, drank wine, and chatted loudly about Jianghu gossip. On the other hand, the small family's caravan was much more well-behaved. The servants were resting, and a few people dressed like stewards were accompanying a young master, talking about something. This kind of situation was very normal. Even people from some small clans wouldn't spoil their children to the point where they didn't know anything. So these small clans would basically let their children participate in some of the family's businesses after they grew up. Even if they couldn't do it, they still had to participate. This was a must. However, at this moment, the young master from the small family seemed to be participating in the caravan for the first time. He kept complaining here and there. When he saw Chu Xiu coming in, he subconsciously snorted and wanted to drive him away. This small Taoist temple was only so big. He didn't want to be in the same room with those vulgar escorts. However, there were a lot of people on the other side. If there really was a conflict, they might not have the upper hand. So, he pinched his nose and tolerated the young master. However, now that he saw Chu Xiu in ordinary clothes and wearing a broken bamboo hat, he could tell that he was not an expert. He could still afford to offend such a person. However, at this moment, The steward of the caravan stopped the young master and said, "Young master, it's not easy for anyone to go out. Don't cause trouble. Have you forgotten what the family head told you?" Hearing the steward mention the family head, the young master also snorted discontentedly. However, he didn't say anything else. Chu Xiu didn't pay attention to them. He only lifted his face cloth and began to eat. He only revealed his mouth, and with the bamboo hat covering his face, no one noticed his appearance. At this moment, the escorts only glanced at Chu Xiu and continued to discuss. One of them said, "Brothers, have you heard about the devil Lin Yi? This person's reputation has been spreading like wildfire recently. It's said that this person is a direct descendant of the Kunlun demon sect. His methods are ruthless and his strength is extremely strong. Even Manor Lord Nye of the morale-gathering manor was willing to offer the position of Manor Lord as a reward to kill him, but he failed." Is that true? The Kunlun devil cult has been destroyed for so many years. How can there be so many descendants? Have you heard too much gossip in the pugilistic world? It's true. Think about it. If Lin Yi wasn't a descendant of the Kunlun devil cult, how could he be so powerful? Let me tell you, I have a brother who was one of the survivors who ambushed Lin Yi with Playboy Chui Lu and the others. That battle was tragic. Master Miao Xian of Miaoyu Temple was directly refined into a mummy by the demonic technique. Giant Spirit General Meng Gang's hard-body technique did not lose to the martial monks of Great Light Temple, but in the end, half of the bones in his body were shattered. Playboy Chui Lu even used a secret technique to fight for his life, but he exhausted himself to death. It is said that Lin Yi is 9 feet tall, has a green face and fangs, and has the appearance of a devil. One look from him and half of your soul will be taken away. He's even more terrifying than a martial arts master. Ha! Third brother Yang, you're bragging again. You don't care about your brothers and relatives. Those who were qualified to follow Playboy Chui Lu to kill Lin Yi were at least at the 5 Cheese origin stage. You're not even at the innate stage, and you have a 5 Cheese origin stage expert as your brother? Even if you lick his ass, he'll still look down on you. Third brother Yang's face turned red. What do you know? Do you think that expert will look down on others like you? I grew up with that brother of mine. Although I'm not as strong as him now, every time I return to my hometown, he'll treat me to a drink. He even calls me third brother. The escorts around them burst into laughter. The Taoist temple was filled with a joyous atmosphere. The young master from a small family curled his lips in disdain and said in a low voice, "Vulgar. Unsightly. You even put a devil cultivator on such a high pedestal. You're really unreasonable." At this moment, everyone present suddenly felt a chill. Even though they had lit a bonfire, they could not dispel the chill. Chu Xiu also put down his rations and raised his head. This wasn't his doing. Although Chu Xiu wasn't broad-minded, he wouldn't lower himself to the level of these low-level people in the pugilistic world just because of a few words from ignorant people. At this moment, a cold wind suddenly blew in from outside the Taoist temple. The door of the Taoist temple was blown open. 2 people wearing black clothes and black iron hats with dragon patterns on their heads and black iron masks on their faces walked in. The 2 of them were dressed exactly the same. The only difference was that one of them wore a mask with a picture of the tearful star and a sad crying face. The other one had a picture of the tearful star and a happy smiling face on his mask. Chu Xiu took a deep breath. He was very familiar with this attire. After all, he had stayed in the Blue Dragon Society for a long time. These 2 people were actually the branch leaders of the Blue Dragon Society. The group of escorts and the people from the small family were scared silly. They didn't even dare to breathe loudly. For these low-level people in the pugilistic world, the Blue Dragon Society was too far away from them. The existence of a branch leader was practically a legend. The 2 of them walked into the temple. Tianfu branch leader, who was wearing a smiling mask, chuckled and said, "Young Master Lin Yi, you are really bold. After killing so many people, you still dare to swagger here. Are you really going to kill your way out of Northern Yen? Respect, respect." He was indeed worthy of being the rising star of the Yinma clan. He was bold and courageous. Let me introduce myself. I am the new leader of the Northern Yen branch of the Blue Dragon Society, Song Shao. I didn't think I'd get such a big job as soon as I arrived in the northern Yen. Not bad, not bad. Compared to Song Xiao, who was a chatterbox and liked to repeat himself, the branch leader of the Weeping Sky branch was much more low-key. He only said lightly, "Weeping Sky branch leader, Han Weeping." Song Xiao's name was Song Xiao. He was always smiling. Han Weeping didn't cry, but the escorts and the young master from the small family were scared to the point of crying. What did they do before? They were actually gossiping about Lin Yi in front of him, especially that young man. He even said that he was a demon of the devil Dao. At this moment, he suddenly felt that it was all because of luck that he was still alive and breathing. Song Xiao looked at those people and smiled. "Why aren't you guys leaving? Are you waiting to watch the show? I'm a man of principle. I won't kill the innocent. But if you guys get hurt by accident, it has nothing to do with me." Hearing Song Xiao's words, the escorts and the people from the small family immediately pissed their pants and ran out of the Taoist temple. They even left the escorts and goods they were protecting behind. Chu Xiu didn't say much. He just looked at the two and squinted his eyes. How did the 4 big blood killers of the Blue Dragon Society get demoted to branch leaders? These 2 strange guys weren't simple. Although they were only one with the world, they were 2 of the 4 strongest assassins below the Grandmaster level in the Blue Dragon Society headquarters. They were called the 4 big blood killers. The remaining 2 were Song Wuxing and Song Wuming. The 4 of them usually fought in pairs. The reason why they were called the 4 great blood killers was because they had killed a martial Dao Grandmaster when they joined forces. To be able to kill a martial Dao master at the oneness of heaven and man state, even if the 2 of them attacked together, the result was shocking enough. Therefore, as long as Han Lei and Song Xiao worked together, or if Song Wuxing and Song Wuming worked together, their power would be equivalent to that of a martial Dao master. Niarenlong also put in a lot of effort this time. With the righteous manners wealth, they couldn't invite a grandmaster. Even if they did, the only grandmasters in the Blue Dragon Society were the few dragon heads. By the time they invited someone, Chu Xiu would probably have left the northern Yen. Therefore, Niarenlong settled for the next best thing and invited Han Weep and Song Xiao. Fortunately, for some unknown reason, these 2 had recently been demoted from the Azure Dragon Society's 4 blood hangmen to the position of division leaders. Otherwise, Niarenlong would not have been able to invite these 2. Chapter 5:34. Han Lei and Song Xiao blocked the entrance of the Taoist temple. There was not a trace of killing intent on their bodies, but it was precisely because of this that they appeared very strange. The 2 of them were the existences of the 4 great blood killers of the Blue Dragon Society. Only the heavens knew how many people had died by their hands. Yet, they were still able to control the killing intent within their bodies, not allowing even a trace of it to leak out. This was the most terrifying thing about them. Song Xiao took a step forward and said with a smile, "We have been entrusted with a task, so we have to be loyal to it. Although we were kicked out of the headquarters to the northern Yen because of some accident, we can't throw away our old profession, right? Young Master Lin, please be on your way." Even when he was talking about killing people, Song Xiao's tone carried a kind of joyful emotion, as if he was happy about this matter. Song Xiao used a saber, while Han Lei used a sword. Song Xiao's saber was a long curved saber. It was like a crescent moon, but on its surface, there was a scorching aura of the sun. Han Lei's sword, on the other hand, looked like a rusty broken iron sword. However, as Han Lei infused his true energy into it, the long sword suddenly exploded with a chill that made one's heart palpitate. It was only now that Chu Xiu realized that the long sword was not rusty at all. It was obviously blood rust that had already dried up. Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes. These 2 were probably the most powerful existences among the elites of the Longhu leaderboard who were one with the world. If these 2 joined forces, they would have a high chance of killing a weaker martial arts master like Qiao Liandong. They were definitely formidable opponents. Therefore, Chu Xiu was even prepared to expose his identity and use all of his trump cards. However, at this moment, a female voice suddenly rang out, "Wait." As the voice fell, a woman with an exquisite and graceful figure wearing a tight black warrior suit ran into the Taoist temple, holding a curved saber that looked like an embroidered eyebrow. She also wore a mask on her face, but it was not the black iron mask of the Blue Dragon Society. Instead, it was a purple mask of a goddess. Although her expression was exaggerated, it gave off a kind of melancholy feeling. Seeing the woman, Song Shao hurriedly said, "Young miss, why did you come in? Didn't I say it before? Leave this matter to us brothers to handle. Lin Ye's strength is definitely worthy of being ranked in the top 10 of the Longhu leaderboard. He's not someone to be trifled with. It's no laughing matter if you accidentally injure him later on." Han Cry said directly, "It's dangerous, get out." The woman shook her head and said, "Uncle Song, Uncle Han, please wait a moment. This young master is my benefactor." Chu Xiu looked at the woman. The more he looked at her, the more familiar she seemed. At this time, the woman took off her mask, revealing a beautiful face. It was Mu Zi. Back then, when Chu Xiu joined the Blue Dragon Society, the first mission he carried out was related to Mu Zi. He helped her take revenge and annihilate the Yu clan. At the same time, it also established Chu Xiu's position in the Blue Dragon Society's Heavenly Sin branch. At that time, although Mu Zi had gotten her revenge, she wanted to commit suicide under the grief of her entire clan being annihilated. However, she was persuaded by a single sentence from Chu Xiu. Back then, when Chu Xiu persuaded Mu Zi, it was actually a matter of convenience. As for whether Mu Zi chose to commit suicide in the end, Chu Xiu had never cared. However, he never imagined that he would see Mu Zi again in this kind of situation. At this time, Mu Zi looked at Chu Xiu with a complicated gaze. Even she herself could not explain the emotions she was feeling. She only smiled at Chu Xiu and said, "I never thought that I would be able to see you again, young master." Mu Zi recognized Chu Xiu, but she was smart enough not to say Chu Xiu's name. Han Lei and Song Shao looked at Mu Zi with astonishment. They had not seen Mu Zi smile for a long time. What was the relationship between Lin Yi and the young miss? Mu Zi turned to Han Lei and Song Shao and said, "Uncle Han, Uncle Song, this young master is truly my benefactor. Can you let me be alone with him for a while? This mission is temporarily suspended." Han Lei and Song Shao looked at each other and nodded. They immediately turned around and left the Taoist temple. They even walked several hundred zhang away from the Taoist temple to guard it. Once an assassin from the Blue Dragon Society received a mission, he had to complete it. This was a matter of principle. However, things like principles also depended on who it was placed on. If it was placed on the young miss, principles could also be put aside. Chu Xiu looked at Mu Zi, took off the mask on his face, and said, "How did you recognize me?" From his voice to his aura to his habits, etc., Chu Xiu had already changed everything. With his face covered, who would be able to recognize him for sure? In the end, this Mu Zi was able to recognize his true identity at a glance. This made Chu Xiu feel a little strange. The corner of Mu Zi's mouth curled into a smile, and she said, "If I said it was a feeling, would you believe me, young Master Chu?" Chu Xiu paused and said, "Of course I believe it. A woman's feeling is sometimes very accurate." Mu Zi said in a faint voice, "Actually, it's not just a feeling. When a person disguises as another person, even if it's a different body, there will still be some parts that are very similar. I have a very deep impression of young Master Chu, so I was able to recognize you." Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and said, "If I remember correctly, I actually only met you once." Mu Zi stared at Chu Xiu and said, "Yes, it was only once. But young Master Chu, you are my benefactor, the benefactor who helped me take revenge for the extermination of my family, and even pulled me back from the depths of despair, so I will never forget you." Chu Xiu was slightly surprised and he smiled and said, "Actually, I am not a good person, it's not like I haven't done such things before. However, I still need to be a bit more honest. When I exterminated the Yu clan, it was only because of a mission, and you also took out something as a reward, so it can't be considered a favor. As for what I said to you, you listened to it, and being alive is your good fortune. If you can't get over it and die, then I'm sorry, I don't have the heart to save a dead person. Most of the time, Chu Xiu did things with a strong sense of utilitarianism. Just as he said, it was not like he had never done such things before. Although Chu Xiu didn't know what kind of opportunities Mu Zi had obtained all these years, 2 of the 4 great blood killers of the Blue Dragon Society were actually very respectful to her, calling her Miss, and even giving up his mission because of Mu Zi's words. Obviously, her identity was not ordinary. But because of this, Chu Xiu didn't try to fool Mu Zi, exaggerating the things that happened in the past, and so on. Just as he said, sometimes it was better to be kind, or else you might find out in the end that you were the one at a disadvantage. Just like Nie Donglu in the original plot, Lu Fengxian was already his good friend, but in the end, Nie Donglu turned a future strong friend into an enemy. As expected, after hearing Chu Xiu's words, Mu Zi's eyes immediately lit up. Chu Xiu was still the same Chu Xiu. Even in the midst of danger and pursuit, Chu Xiu still hadn't changed. Although the current Mu Zi was no longer the same as before, in her heart, Chu Xiu was still the lofty person who had casually destroyed the Yu clan with a psychological attack, helping her take revenge for her clan's extermination. If Chu Xiu were to force her to do something for him after seeing her relationship with the Azure Dragon Society, Mu Zi would definitely be disappointed, even if she agreed to do it for the sake of the kindness she had shown him in the past. Chu Xiu asked, "I'm very curious. What have you been doing all these years? You actually joined the Blue Dragon Society, and it seems that your position isn't low either." Actually, not only was Mu Zi's position not low, her current strength was not low either. Chu Xiu could feel that Mu Zi's cultivation was at the 5 Qis unification realm. Although compared to the current Chu Xiu, the 5 Qis unification realm was nothing, but according to Mu Zi's strength and her current age, it was already not easy. Mu Zi said softly, "The Yu clan was destroyed by you, young Master Chu, and I got my revenge. So, I decided to roam the pugilistic world alone. If I, a woman, want to establish a foothold in the pugilistic world, I have to be more ruthless than a man. Later, I accidentally met someone from the Blue Dragon Society. Because of you, I didn't have any ill feelings towards the Blue Dragon Society, so I prepared to join the Blue Dragon Society. However, at that time, young Master Chu had already fallen out with the Blue Dragon Society and left. The Heavenly Sin branch also changed to a new branch leader, so they started to clean up the old members of the Heavenly Sin branch. I was a newcomer, and my performance was outstanding, so I was recognized by the new branch leader. I was rewarded to go to the headquarters of the Blue Dragon Society to cultivate for a period of time. During this period, I was also given pointers by the experts from the headquarters. At the headquarters of the Blue Dragon Society, I got to know the second dragon head of the Blue Dragon Society, Duanmu Qianshan, and took him as my adoptive father. That's why I left the branch. Uncle Song and Uncle Han were personally brought up by my adoptive father, and they are loyal to him. That's why they listen to everything I say and call me Mississippi. Hearing Mu Zi's words, Chu Xiu was a little surprised. He didn't expect that Mu Zi would actually become Duanmu Qianshan's adoptive daughter. At the mention of the name Duanmu Qianshan, most people in the Jianghu were very unfamiliar with it. One reason was that the second dragon head of the Blue Dragon Society, Crescent Green Dragon, Bu Tianen, was too high profile. He was so high profile that he didn't seem like a killer at all. On the other hand, Duanmu Qianshan was very low-key, so low-key that he rarely showed his face in front of outsiders. Therefore, in the Jianghu, he wasn't even as famous as the dragon heads of the Blue Dragon Society. In fact, Duanmu Qianshan was very important to the Blue Dragon Society. It could even be said that Duanmu Qianshan was even more important to the Blue Dragon Society than the second dragon head, Bu Tianen. For so many years, if Duanmu Qianshan hadn't stabilized the internal structure of the Blue Dragon Society, with Bu Tiannan's crazy way of doing things, even if the Blue Dragon Society wasn't destroyed by Bu Tianen, it would have been torn apart. Chapter 5:35. As the second dragon head of the Blue Dragon Society, Duanmu Qianshan was not famous for his martial arts. Instead, he was famous for his brains. In fact, Duanmu Qianshan did not have much martial arts. He was only half a martial arts grandmaster. It was said that Duanmu Qianshan was half a martial arts grandmaster because he made a mistake when he was trying to break through to the true pellet realm, causing his true pellet to be destroyed. However, he did not die. Instead, he retained some of his strength. He was stronger than ordinary oneness of heaven and man realm martial artists, but not as strong as a grandmaster with the true pellet realm. Therefore, he was considered half a martial arts grandmaster. Of course, martial arts was just the icing on the cake for Duanmu Qianshan. What Duanmu Qianshan was really good at was not martial arts. Duanmu Qianshan was known as half-a-day's fortune teller. It meant that man's fortune teller was not as good as God's fortune teller. Duanmu Qianshan was a man, so naturally he was not as good as God's fortune teller. However, he had half the strength of God's fortune teller. Therefore, he was known as half-a-day's fortune teller. His attainments in divination were comparable to those Taoist and Buddhist sect grandmasters who studied karma. Moreover, Duanmu Qianshan was not only good at divination, but he was also good at medicine, array, and other miscellaneous skills. In the Blue Dragon Society, although Bu Tianan was the second dragon head, Duanmu Qianshan was in charge of 99% of the matters. Bu Tianan did not understand those chores, and he was too lazy to bother himself with them. Therefore, in the Blue Dragon Society, Duanmu Qianshan's prestige was not inferior to Bu Tianan's. If Duanmu Qianshan was not supporting the Blue Dragon Society, with Bu Tianan's crazy personality, the Blue Dragon Society would have been torn apart by him. Moreover, Duanmu Qianshan was good at judging people. Many of the top killers in the Blue Dragon Society were discovered by Duanmu Qianshan. For example, Han Cry and Song Xiao. Even Duanmu Qianshan was no match for the two of them when they joined forces. However, when they had just reached the physical invulnerability realm, Duanmu Qianshan had taken a liking to them at first glance. He had imparted martial arts to them based on their personalities and had given them pointers and support. Although Duanmu Qianshan's strength was not great, that was because his martial Dao aptitude was too poor. It was useless even if he had countless heaven and earth treasures to make up for it. However, his understanding and attainments in martial Dao were stronger than most martial Dao masters. It could be said that Duanmu Qianshan was the one who created Han Cry and Song Xiao. That was why these two were so obedient to Duanmu Qianshan's adopted daughter, Muzi. To them, their first loyalty was to Duanmu Qianshan, followed by Bu Tian. The Azure Dragon Society could only be ranked third. After hearing this, Chu Xiu frowned and said, "Since you have become Duanmu Qianshan's daughter, why did you come to the Northern Yen?" And Han Cry and Song Xiao, these two are the top killers in the Blue Dragon Society, the four blood killers. Why did they come here to be branch leaders? Isn't this a waste? The true elites of the Blue Dragon Society were not in the 36 Big Dipper divisions, but in the headquarters. Originally, the Sin branch leader came from the headquarters, but he was demoted to the Sin branch to be a branch leader. However, he always wanted to return to the headquarters. For Han Cry and Song Xiao, with their strength, coming to the Northern Yen to be a branch leader was definitely a demotion. Mu Zi smiled bitterly and shook her head. It's because my adoptive father offended the great dragon head and is now in seclusion as punishment. Because Uncle Song and Uncle Han are my adoptive father's people, they were also demoted to the Northern Yen. With that, Mu Zi told Chu Xiu everything that had happened in the Blue Dragon Society. She did not hide anything. The great dragon head of the Blue Dragon Society, Crescent Green Dragon, Bu Tianan, was very famous in the pugilistic world. However, he was arrogant, and willful. In the past, because the Blue Dragon Society's Sin branch was destroyed, this bastard actually went to the Great Light Temple and fought with the seat of delusion Zen Hall's 9 Wonders Dragon Tree, Su Yun. He directly put on a stance that said he would not rest until one of them died, and actually forced the Great Light Temple to stop. This matter was quite famous. However, from Duanmu Qianshan's point of view, it was fine for Bu Tianan to go crazy once in a while. However, if Bu Tianan went crazy every time, it would only put the Blue Dragon Society in danger. Mu Zi shook her head and said, "Adoptive father told me that the great dragon head is a little too arrogant and can't see itself clearly. Not long ago, the great dragon head actually went to provoke the Vermilion Bird Pavilion of Western Chu, which doesn't have much of a grudge against the Blue Dragon Society. This caused both sides to become enemies, and the great dragon head also revealed that the Blue Dragon Society wants to expand. The Blue Dragon Society had been passed down for so many years. As long as they were a sword in the hands of the pugilistic world, then as long as there were disputes and killings in the pugilistic world, the Blue Dragon Society would continue to exist. But now, according to the Great Dragon Head, the Blue Dragon Society shouldn't just be a sword in the hands of others, but a sword wielder. Adoptive father's meaning was that if the Blue Dragon Society wanted to be a sword wielder, it was fine. However, with the many people that the Blue Dragon Society had killed over the years, the Blue Dragon Society needed to have the strength to wield the sword. Otherwise, the Blue Dragon Society would be suppressed by the majority of the pugilistic world. And the current Blue Dragon Society clearly didn't have this kind of strength. During the discussion at the headquarters, the Great Dragon Head and Adoptive Father started to quarrel over this matter. Even the people who supported the Great Dragon Head and Adoptive Father were arguing, and it almost turned into an internal fight. For the sake of the Blue Dragon Society's future, Adoptive Father could only take the initiative to retreat. However, in the end he was stripped of most of his power by the Great Dragon Head and was ordered to reflect on his mistakes. As for the powerful assassins in the headquarters like Uncle Han and Uncle Song, they were demoted to other places. Adoptive Father was worried that I wouldn't be safe in the headquarters, so he let me follow Uncle Han and Uncle Song to Northern Yen. With the two of them around, even if a martial arts grandmaster were to make a move, they would be able to protect me. After hearing Mu Zi's words, Chu Xiu really didn't expect such a big change to happen in the Blue Dragon Society. However, the Blue Dragon Society's matter was generally a power struggle. No one was right or wrong. Duanmu Qianshan's suggestion was right for the current Blue Dragon Society. The Blue Dragon Society was an assassin organization. The righteous path could use it, the demonic path could use it, you could use it, and I could also use it. Therefore, as long as the Blue Dragon Society didn't go too far, the people of the pugilistic world could tolerate it. After all, everyone knew that as long as there were grudges and killings in the pugilistic world, even if the Blue Dragon Society didn't exist, there would still be the White Dragon Society and the Black Dragon Society. However, if the Blue Dragon Society revealed its ambition to expand, then based on the people the Blue Dragon Society had killed over the years and the karma they had sown, it wouldn't be wrong to say that they would become the enemy of the whole world. The moon-worshipping cult was a big sect of the demonic path. Why did they openly become neighbors with the Longhu Mountain's celestial master mansion? It was all because of the peerless expert Yi Shaonan. The entire moon-worshipping cult had countless experts. Many people in the pugilistic world knew that the Yinma clan still had the beautiful dream of reviving the Kunlun devil cult. Why didn't they go all out to kill the Yinma clan? It was because there were still some old monsters in the Yinma clan who hadn't died yet. Once they were forced into a life and death struggle, it would also set off a storm in the pugilistic world. Therefore, everything in this world depended on strength. The Blue Dragon Society wasn't weak, but they didn't have the qualifications to fight against so many enemies. Therefore, Duanmu Qianshan's suggestion was right for the long term of the Blue Dragon Society. But at the same time, what Bu Tianan did wasn't wrong. He was the Great Dragon Head, and he was the true leader of the Blue Dragon Society. In the end, his plan was criticized to be worthless. Even so, there were so many people in the Blue Dragon Society who supported Duanmu Qianshan despite his status as the Great Dragon Head. It would be strange if Bu Tianan wasn't afraid. Moreover, this time, Bu Tianan only chose to deprive Duanmu Qianshan of his power and suppress his subordinates. In Chu Xiu's opinion, this was already considered restraint. If it were Chu Xiu himself, if he had a subordinate like Duanmu Qianshan who was known as the Second Dragon Head, but his actual power had already threatened the existence of the Great Dragon Head, Chu Xiu reckoned that he would have already killed someone and cleaned up the place. Mu Zi paused for a moment before continuing. By the way, young Master Chu, the Heavenly Sin Branch leader who tried to harm you in the past was recognized by the Grand Dragon Head because he killed someone from the White Tiger Hall. He was rewarded with a lot of medicinal pills and cultivation methods. He also used this opportunity to step into the Martial Dao Grandmaster realm and become one of the 5 dragon heads of our Green Dragon Society. The Sin Branch leader's real name is Duan Tianlang. He's despicable, shameless, and cunning. He doesn't stand on any side for his own benefit. Before he became a Martial Dao Grandmaster, he wanted to seek refuge with my adoptive father. However, my adoptive father could see that he was up to no good and didn't accept him. He even taught him that the Blue Dragon Society only cares about strength. In the end, after he became a Martial Dao Grandmaster, this person changed his stance and encouraged the Great Dragon Head to act recklessly and speak ill of my godfather. Now that the Great Dragon Head has become like this, Duan Tianlang is partly to blame. Chu Xiu was really surprised to hear news about the Sin Branch leader, Duan Tianlang. However, he didn't forget about Duan Tianlang. Chu Xiu had always been a narrow-minded person. Chu Xiu had to find a chance to avenge the enmity back then. As for Duan Tianlang's current achievements, Chu Xiu wasn't that surprised. Back when Duan Tianlang was the Sin Branch leader, his strength had already reached the peak of the unity of heaven and man realm. Now that he had the resources, it wouldn't be difficult for him to step into the Martial Dao Grandmaster realm. Moreover, this Duan Tianlang was indeed unscrupulous. Back then, for the sake of the blood jade exquisite treasure, he did not even hesitate to sacrifice Chu Xiu and other talented subordinates. To him, as long as he could obtain the treasure, sacrificing the entire Heavenly Sin Branch would not be a problem. This person only cared about his own interests and had no principles to speak of. It wasn't surprising that he would do such a thing now. As for the messy affairs of the Blue Dragon Society, Mu Zi didn't hide it from Chu Xiu. Knowing that Chu Xiu was in danger now, Mu Zi said directly, "Young Master Chu, the morgue doesn't have many people to hunt you down now. After your last battle, I don't think anyone below the Martial Dao Grandmaster level will dare to come and court death." Therefore, the morgue paid a huge sum of money to hire the Blue Dragon Society. Now, you can disguise yourself as a member of the Blue Dragon Society and leave Northern Yen. Even if the morgue intercepts you, they won't dare to investigate the Blue Dragon Society. Chapter 5:36. Rules were dead, but people were alive. There was no rule in this world that couldn't be broken. Even the strict rules of the Blue Dragon Society could be broken as long as no one investigated. Mu Zi was Duanmu Qianshan's adopted daughter. Han Ku and Song Shao were raised by Duanmu Qianshan. Now that Mu Zi wanted to help release Chu Xiu, the two didn't have any objections. Instead, they did their best to help. Chu Xiu didn't stand on ceremony with Mu Zi. He really needed to return to the Guanzhong torture room to heal his primordial spirit. Therefore, under Mu Zi's arrangement, Chu Xiu disguised himself as a member of the Blue Dragon Society. Han Ku and Song Shao escorted him safely out of Northern Yen. As for the Blue Dragon Society's reply to the Morgue village, it was even simpler. They didn't kill Lin Yi and let him escape. If the Morgue village doesn't revoke the bounty, we'll continue to hunt him down. If the Morgue village revokes the bounty, it doesn't matter. In any case, in the entire Northern Yen, Han Ku and Song Shao had the highest status. No one dared to snitch on them. At the border of Northern Yen and Guanzhong, Mu Zi looked at Chu Xiu and softly said, "Young master, have a safe journey." Mu Zi didn't know how she felt about Chu Xiu. Perhaps it was gratitude? Or something else? Mu Zi only knew that before she had acknowledged Duanmu Qianshan as her adoptive father, when she was fighting in the Jianghu, whenever she encountered a situation where she could not hold on, she would always remember what Chu Xiu had told her. You can't just live a life of death. Chu Xiu took off the Blue Dragon Society mask and handed it to Mu Zi and said, "I saved you in the past. Now you save me. You don't have to keep it in your heart." However, Miss Mu, your adopted father's situation in Blue Dragon Society isn't very optimistic. If there are any problems, you can come find me." With that said, Chu Xiu turned and left. Mu Zi looked at Chu Xiu's back with a strange look in her eyes. Chu Xiu saved her in the past. Now she helped Chu Xiu. Although it seemed like the past had been settled, to Mu Zi, she still couldn't forget Chu Xiu. In the past, Chu Xiu had saved her in her hour of need. He had given her hope when she was at her most desperate. Now that she helped Chu Xiu, it could only be considered as the icing on the cake at most. Han Lei and Song Xiao didn't know Chu Xiu's identity, but Mu Zi knew that even if Han Lei and Song Xiao joined forces, the chances of them defeating Chu Xiu were not high. Although the two of them had the record of killing a martial Dao grandmaster together, only they knew how dangerous that battle was. On the other hand, Chu Xiu was an existence that killed a martial Dao grandmaster alone. Therefore, even without her help, it wasn't impossible for Chu Xiu to kill his way out by himself. At this moment, Song Xiao and Han Lei stood behind Mu Zi and looked at her with a strange look in their eyes. When Duanmu Qianshan took Mu Zi in as his adopted daughter, the main reason was because of her tenacity. It was as if she couldn't be cut down no matter what. Mu Zi's hardships in cultivating in the Blue Dragon Society and her decisiveness in carrying out missions made many men blush with shame. Therefore, Han Lei and Song Xiao were very surprised that Mu Zi would show such a hesitant expression to a man. Song Xiao said, "Miss, actually, it's fine if you like this Lin Yi. His identity is worthy of you. He's an elite of the Lurking Devil clan. Although he can't be seen most of the time, he still has strength and status. If you marry him, Lord Duanmu will also gain the support of the Lurking Devil clan." After a moment of silence, Mu Zi shook her head and said, "Uncle Song, don't tease me. You know that's not what I meant. Moreover, you don't know him. Something like a marriage alliance is not attractive to him." Han Lei and Song Xiao only knew about Lin Yi, but they didn't know that Chu Xiu and Lin Yi were the same person. Being ranked 4th on the Longhu leaderboard, Chu Xiu's status was only second to the likes of Zhang Qingjin and Zhong Xian. If nothing unexpected happened, Chu Xiu would definitely become a powerful figure in the pugilistic world in the future. For an existence like Chu Xiu, something like a marriage alliance was indeed not attractive. After pausing for a moment, Mu Zi said, "Uncle Han, Uncle Song, let's go. We can just brush off the Blue Dragon Society. The main thing is, we have to pay attention to foster father's side at all times." Han Lei and Song Xiao nodded their heads with a serious look on their faces. For the current Green Dragon Society, they were indeed in a very tricky situation. Even an outsider like Chu Xiu who only knew the general situation could see that the atmosphere in the Blue Dragon Society was not right, let alone the members of the Blue Dragon Society. Therefore, they didn't know how things would develop next. They could only take it one step at a time. After a few days, Chu Xiu had already left the northern Yanland and returned to Guangzhou. The Morgue village didn't send anyone to continue the chase. This wasn't because Niaran Long had vented his anger, but because the people of the Morgue village thought that they had spent a lot of money to get Han Lei and Song Xiao to deal with Chu Xiu so they could save some energy and wait for Chu Xiu's death. However, at this time, Chu Xiu had already returned to the Guangzhou torture room. The first thing he did was to secretly contact Mei Qinglian. Previously, it was Mei Qinglian who took the initiative to find him, but this time, it was Chu Xiu who personally went to find Mei Qinglian instead of Chu Xiu. In her room, Mei Qinglian was surprised to see Chu Xiu appear. She asked, "How did you get out of the Morgue Manor and the encirclement of so many rogue cultivators so quickly?" Chu Xiu bluntly sat in front of Mei Qinglian and said, "I naturally have my own methods. However, Saintess, you've made me miserable this time. Being chased for thousands of miles doesn't feel good." Mei Qinglian spread her hands and said, You can't blame me for this. Who knew that hypocrite Niranlong would care so much about his son? When Ye Donglu was killed by you, he went crazy. I also found 2 people to pick you up before. One of them is an acquaintance of yours, the 9 abandonment sword, Sheng Tianyao of the Northern Yen royal family. He had a conflict with the Morgue village because of you last time. If he saves you this time, he can pretend to have a conflict with the Morgue village again and then save you indirectly. As for me, I secretly informed that kid Lu Jin and told him to receive you. That kid recently stepped into the real pellet state of martial Dao, and he is considered to be the real upper echelon of the phaseless demon sect. At this time, he is very arrogant and he wants to find someone to test his skills. I simply let him go to Northern Yen. These 2 people, one in the open and one in the dark, should not be a problem to bring you out of Northern Yen, but I didn't expect you to come back quietly. Lu Jin was Mr. Lu of the phaseless demon sect. When Chu Xiu saw Mr. Lu last time, Mr. Lu was already half a step into the real pellet state. It was not surprising that Mr. Lu was promoted to the martial Dao Grand Master at this time. Chu Xiu didn't feel angry about Mei Qinglian's explanation. Demonic Dao was not the right way, and its development itself was very cruel. If you have the ability and value, I will protect you and protect you. On the contrary, even if you die, no one will care about you. Between Chu Xiu and the Hidden Demon Clan, the meaning of the transaction was much stronger than the inheritance. How much reputation and benefits he could bring to the Hidden Demon Clan? The Hidden Demon Clan would also give Chu Xiu something. Including the matter of Pang Hu this time, it was actually a transaction. If it was done well, Chu Xiu would be rewarded. If it was messed up, then you are useless. This time, Chu Xiu actually succeeded. Qilian village was saved, and Ju Yi Manor was half destroyed. It was just that there were some accidents that caused Chu Xiu to fall into it. Therefore, Mei Qinglian could send 2 martial Dao grandmasters to save Chu Xiu, which was already extremely benevolent. Chu Xiu never imagined that Mei Qinglian would come to save him regardless of the risk of exposing her identity. This was right with Chu Xiu's own speculation. Even if the Hidden Demon Clan really sent someone to pick him up, he had to support himself in the blank time in the middle. It was better to rely on oneself than others. It was more reliable to kill his way out. Therefore, for Mei Qinglian's explanation, Chu Xiu just nodded and didn't say much. Mei Qinglian might have realized that she had indeed miscalculated this time. It wasn't a problem to send Chu Xiu, but she didn't arrange a way out in advance. If Mei Qinglian had informed Sheng Tianyao in advance, perhaps there wouldn't be so much trouble. After all, this matter was Mei Qinglian's own matter, not the entire Hidden Demon Clan's. Now that there was a problem, Mei Qinglian also felt a little embarrassed. Mei Qinglian coughed and said, "Well, this matter is indeed partly my responsibility. I originally wanted to give you something, but now I can't bring it out. I should change it to something else, but this thing is not in my hands. I can only try my best to help you fight for it. Whether you can get it or not depends on the final development." Hearing Mei Qinglian's words, Chu Xiu was interested. He asked, "What is it?" Mei Qinglian knocked on the table with her slender fingers and said, "It's a qualification to enter Xiaofan." Xiaofan? Is it an ancient relic or a secret land? Chu Xiu asked. Mei Qinglian shook her head and said, "I don't know whether that place is a relic or a secret land. Some people even say that it's a world. However, the existence of Xiaofan is related to the ancient tribulation. That place only appeared after the ancient tribulation. There are countless relics and secret lands in it, as well as countless luck and opportunities. By the way, I remember that you have several great compassion poems of heaven and earth intersecting yin and yang. Tell me, how many great compassion poems have you collected?" Chu Xiu pondered for a moment, but still told the truth, 5. Mei Qinglian's eyes revealed a trace of astonishment. "I didn't expect that you would actually be able to quietly gather all 5 great compassion poems. I reckon that in the history of Jianghu, you are the one who has gathered the most great compassion poems. But do you know where the source of the great compassion poems of heaven and earth intersecting yin and yang is? It's in this Xiaofan. If you can enter it, Maybe you can collect the complete version of the great compassion poems of heaven and earth intersecting yin and yang. Chapter 537. This was the first time Chu Xiu had heard of this little mortal world. He had never heard of these three words before. However, judging from Mei Qinglian's attitude, it was obvious that this place was extraordinary. Moreover, Mei Qinglian said that this place could allow Chu Xiu to gather the sorrowful poem of heaven and earth intersecting yin and yang. This indeed tempted Chu Xiu. Heaven and earth intersecting yin and yang great compassion fu was a powerful demonic art. No one knew how powerful it was because no one had ever collected all of it. However, according to other people's speculations, its lower limit was 9 transformations. After gathering all of it, this cultivation technique might reach the level of a supreme cultivation technique or a peerless cultivation technique. Seeing Chu Xiu's expression, Mei Qinglian smiled and said, "If it's just this, then I don't need to be so cautious." The existence of Xiao Fan Tian wasn't a secret to the top of the pugilistic world. It was just that the conditions to enter were very harsh. However, there were countless opportunities inside. Ever since the ancient calamity, Xiao Fan Tian had appeared. Countless people had entered it, but no one had explored it completely. My holy sect's supreme Dugu had entered before. After coming out, he created a peerless demonic cultivation technique that shocked the heavens and earth. Chunyang Dao sect's Immortal, Ning Xuanji had also entered and comprehended the Tianji celestial technique. His cultivation was extremely high. This was far away. There was moon-worshipping sect's Yi Shaonan. After entering Xiao Fan Tian, he finally completed the Mend Heaven Heart Sutra that he had painstakingly cultivated for decades. There was also World Alliance's Chunqing Di who had honed his unparalleled fist intent to the peak in Xiao Fan Tian. In short, this was a very mystical place. After entering it, one wouldn't have a 100% chance to soar into the sky, but it could provide a stepping stone for one to soar into the sky. Whether one could take advantage of this opportunity to soar into the sky would depend on one's own strength and luck. Xiao Fan Tian opened once every 30 years. The location of the opening was different every time. Other than the first 6 hours, one could enter at will. At other times, one needed a specific key to enter. So, if you want to enter Xiao Fan Tian, you can only rely on the illusory luck and the key. These keys are controlled by the top sects and some experts in the pugilistic world. There are very few scattered in the pugilistic world. Chu Xiu asked, "Saintess has the key?" Mei Qinglian rolled her eyes and said, "If I had the key, do you think I would give it to you? With the power of my Yin demon sect in the past, I naturally have keys and not just one. However, my Yin demon sect has experienced great changes in the past, and I'm the only one left. The keys have long since been taken away." I said that I could help you get the key to Xiao Fan Tian. I was referring to the key of Guanzhong torture room. Don't think that Guanzhong torture room's current strength is remarkable, but the favors and connections left behind by Chu Kuanga are beyond your imagination. Now, Guan Xiu has 3 keys in her hands, all left behind by Chu Kuanga. Under normal circumstances, only 3 people from the Guanzhong Disciplinary Hall will enter the minor mortal heaven this time. They are Guan Xiu, the second in command of the Punishment Division, Fang Sha, and the great commander that you haven't seen before, 5 Law Sword, and Lionian. At the mention of an Lionian's name, killing intent flashed in Mei Qinglian's eyes. Previously, Mei Qinglian had said that if it weren't for the few leaders of the Punishment Division, she could have controlled Guanzhong torture room long ago. Fang Sha and An Lionian were the biggest obstacles in front of Mei Qinglian. Mei Qinglian said, "With my current identity, I can't fight for the key to Xiao Fan Tian. I can't enter, but you can. It's not long before Xiao Fan Tian opens. Recuperate during this period of time. I'll try my best to talk to Guan Xiu and get him to give you a key. You've just entered unity of heaven and man, so it's unrealistic that you can become a martial Dao Grandmaster just by entering Xiao Fan Tian. However, I can guarantee that if you can obtain some similar opportunities, you'll at least be able to build a good foundation for you to become a martial Dao Grandmaster." Chu Xiu nodded when he heard that. If Xiao Fan Tian was really that miraculous, then his injuries this time were worth it. Since that's the case, I'll go back to recuperate and wait for the Saintess' good news. With that, Chu Xiu left. His priority now was to recuperate from the injuries on his primordial spirit. Otherwise, even if he obtained the opportunity to enter Xiao Fan Tian this time, he wouldn't be able to unleash his greatest strength. Only a few of Chu Xiu's confidants knew that he had gone to Northern Yen. Everyone else in Guanxi thought that Chu Xiu was still in closed-door cultivation. When Chu Xiu returned to Guanxi, the first person he went to find was none other than Lu Fengxian. Previously, Lu Fengxian was also in closed-door cultivation to cultivate the Nine Heavens Fiend Golden Body and the Demon God Unparalleled Halberd, but he had already come out of closed-door cultivation and noticed that Chu Xiu wasn't around. However, Lu Fengxian wasn't a talkative person. Even though he noticed that Chu Xiu wasn't around, he didn't say much. At this time, seeing Chu Xiu's appearance, Lu Fengxian immediately noticed that Chu Xiu was abnormal. "Brother Chu, are you injured?" Chu Xiu nodded. Xin Jiuyo, who was with Lu Fengxian, interrupted, "Hee, Chu Xiu, you're really unlucky this time. The foundation of your primordial spirit was injured. This kind of injury isn't easy to heal no matter where it is." As one of the 4 generals under Marquis Lu Wenhou in the past, Xin Jiuyo was good at primordial spirit's secret methods. At this time, he immediately saw through Chu Xiu's background. These 4 people had recovered some of their cultivation during this period of time, and they even reached the 3-flower realm. However, Xin Jiuyo and the others' attitude toward Chu Xiu was far inferior to that of Lu Fengxian. From the way the 4 of them saw it, Lu Fengxian had obtained Marquis Lu's inheritance, which meant that she was the second successor of Marquis Lu. She was their master. What was Chu Xiu? Even though he had a good relationship with Lu Fengxian and was best friends, Xin Jiuyo and the others still treated Chu Xiu with arrogance. They were also a little dissatisfied that Lu Fengxian had given the Nine Heavens Fiend Golden Body to Chu Xiu. Lu Fengxian frowned slightly. This seemed to be the most serious injury Chu Xiu had ever suffered since he met Chu Xiu. It even hurt his foundation. "Brother Chu, what are you going to do?" "It just so happens that Divine Dr. Feng is in Guanxi now. I'll take you to see him." Chu Xiu nodded and said, "That's what I was thinking." Lin Ye's mental strength was severely injured, and now Chu Xiu, who had been in seclusion, was also severely injured. This kind of thing was too much of a coincidence, and it was easy for people to think of something. Chu Xiu did not trust Feng Buping, but he trusted Lu Fengxian. With Lu Fengxian's important relationship, Feng Buping had no reason to reveal this matter. Moreover, this was the land of Guanxi, Chu Xiu's territory. Even if Feng Buping had any other intentions, he could not cause any trouble. In the medical center of Guanxi's Jianghu prefecture, Feng Buping's hand seeped into Chu Xiu's body to check on Chu Xiu's injuries. Feng Buping had been in Guanxi for a while. Compared to when he was in the Valley of the Dead, it was actually more convenient for him to be in Guanxi. In this small area of Guanzhong, the Guanzhong torture hall was a great deterrent. Chu Xiu helped Feng Buping open such a medical center in Jianghu prefecture, and there were also the Jianghu constables of the Guanzhong torture room to maintain order here. It was much more convenient than when Feng Buping was in the Valley of the Dead. Therefore, when Lu Fengxian brought Chu Xiu for treatment, Feng Buping immediately pushed away the martial artists who were queuing outside and gave priority to treating Chu Xiu. Of course, Lu Fengxian played a part in this, but the main reason was that Feng Buping was now in Chu Xiu's territory. Feng Buping had a strange temper, but he was not an idiot. Of course, he knew who was protecting him now. Sensing the foundation of Chu Xiu's spirit was damaged, Feng Buping's expression changed slightly. Previously in the Northern Yen, Lin Ye's matter caused an uproar. Everyone in the Jianghu knew about this. And Chu Xiu was punished to face the wall. Everyone in the Guanzhong torture room knew about this. Feng Buping had never heard that facing the wall could cause damage to one's spirit or even cause damage to one's foundation. There was clearly something wrong with this. However, Feng Buping didn't say anything, he just pretended not to notice. He didn't care who Chu Xiu was or what secrets he had. He only knew that Chu Xiu and Lu Fengxian were good friends, And he was still living in Chu Xiu's territory. That was enough. Sometimes, it was better to be muddle-headed. Don't say what you shouldn't say, don't see what you shouldn't see. When Feng Buping stopped, Lu Fengxian quickly asked, Divine Dr. Feng, how is Brother Chu? Feng Buping took a deep breath and said, Official Chu's situation isn't very optimistic. It has already damaged the foundation of his spirit. Although I can heal this kind of injury with my current ability, it will leave a hidden danger, which will affect the growth of his spirit in the future. Lu Fengxian frowned. She knew that Chu Xiu was good at spirit mystic arts, but now Chu Xiu's spirit was injured, which was equivalent to cutting off Chu Xiu's future cultivation path of spirit mystic arts. However, Chu Xiu didn't mind. This group of medical practitioners were all the same. They never said anything that was certain. So Chu Xiu just asked indifferently, Is there a way to make up for this kind of hidden danger? Feng Buping nodded and said, There is, but the conditions are a bit harsh. The simplest is official Chu. You can step into the martial Dao Grandmaster realm within 2 years. At that time, your injury hasn't stabilized. You can use the world's essence Qi to cleanse your foundation when advancing to the martial Dao Grandmaster realm. The second is official Chu. You can find some secret arts that specialize in repairing spirit, but this kind of secret art is the rarest, even rarer than offensive and defensive secret arts. The third is that Lord Chu is able to find 9 revolutions spirit herbs that are specifically targeted at the primordial spirit. Consuming and refining them will also be effective. LV Fengxian's brows furrowed even deeper after hearing Feng Buping's explanation. Because every single one of those 3 conditions was extremely harsh. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.